Welcome to Heroes Have Wings, the podcast that gives a voice to the unsung heroes of Army aviation. I'm your host, Jason Santiago. For the Army aviators, crew chiefs, and flight medics who put it all on the line in the heat of battle, this is their opportunity to share untold stories of courage, sacrifice, and unbreakable will. From their beginnings to the battlefield, you hear about their hardships, the moments of doubt, and how they overcame impossible odds to save lives. These warriors didn't just fight for survival, they put others above themselves, embodying the true spirit of heroism and selfless service. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Heroes Have Wings. Today, we got a guest who defies resilience, adaptability, and straight-up grit. Matt Cole. From growing up as the oldest of 8 in Ohio to serving 20 years across the Navy and Army, Matt's journey is nothing short of legendary. He's flown helicopters over combat zones, survived 3 deployments, and when asked about medals, he keeps it real. Who gives about medals? I survived 3 combat deployments, and that's notable enough. Now, a major airline pilot and a mentor for the next generation, Matt continues to lead by example. Whether he's boating, restoring old Chevys, or heat pressing custom swag, he lives life on his own terms. And yeah, he is a Swiftie and proud of it. Get ready for an episode packed with real talk, hard lessons, and a legacy built for his kids and grandkids. Matt Cole, welcome to Heroes Have Wings.
Wow, what a glowing introduction. I super appreciate that. That's pretty awesome. But I want to talk about you. I want to talk about you first before we get this whole mess started. Because this has been a long time since I've got to ride on the Big Santi Express. All aboard the Big Santi Express. So for all your listeners who have no idea what that is, back in the day when me and Jason used to be in the same unit together, not exactly sure how it came up. I believe that the Big Santi name was a little brought on by itself. I think you rolled in with that one, and I just took it and ran with it, especially after you made aircraft commander. You was in charge of your own train. Might as well call it the Big Santi Express. All aboard. Here we are.
Love it, man. That's I really appreciate you for that, Matt. I would tell some of my friends now about, my nickname in the Army was Big Santi, and they're like, why? I got that name from Sergeant Dempsey when we were in Iraq in 2003, 2004. We're all playing dominoes one day, and he just started calling me Big Santi. And then from there, I remember when I showed up to the Warlords, you and I were joking around. I said, yeah, call me Big Santi. And then from there, it grew. Then we started the Big Santi Express. Man, those are some good times, man. So let's get started quick.
Yeah, writing it on chalk, taking chalk and writing Big Santi Express on your door. That shit was fun.
I remember that every time I showed up to my aircraft after I made PC, you'd always run out there and put Big Santi Express on my door.
And here we are now, all aboard yet again.
All right, so let's get it started. Quick hits. You ready?
I'm ready.
Coffee, energy drinks.
Coffee in the morning, energy drinks at night when I'm working.
Okay. City life, country living.
I like the country living for sure.
Summer heat, winter cold.
I like the cold, man. I'm a big fan.
Okay. Movie or books?
Both.
Dog
Lately,
person?
movies.
Say again?
Lately, movies, but I'm good with both.
Dog person or cat person?
Dog, all day long.
Beach vacation, mountain retreat?
Beach for sure.
Wake up early, stay up late?
Stay up late. I ain't down with getting up early.
I don't think you ever got up early, man.
No.
Action movies or comedies?
I mean, dude, come on. You know me. Comedies every day.
All day. Camping or road trip?
I would rather camp.
Really?
Dude, I don't like driving. I can't stand driving, man. If you want to get somewhere, take an airplane. Seriously. I don't want to go on a road trip.
Texting or calling?
Uh, I like the convenience of a text, but I like the personal aspect of talking to someone and hearing their voice. So I'm gonna go with calling.
Okay. Yeah, I like them both. I like either. I think the situation dictates which one I'm going to use. So it's situation dependent.
Yep, agreed.
All right, man, let's get it started. Let's talk about that
Let's do
childhood.
it.
You growing up in Ohio. How do you say the town you were born in?
Lima. I was born in Lima, or I was born in Bellefontaine, Ohio, but I grew up in a town called Lima, Ohio, is where I spent the majority of my childhood.
Now, parents, married, still married?
They are divorced now, and my mom has since remarried, but they were married for like 25 years. So, like right after I joined the Navy, that they split up. So the whole time I was home growing up, they were.
Now, how was that dynamic, your mom and dad's relationship?
I think it was all right. You know, obviously they ended up getting divorced 25 years later, but when I was growing up, um, it was interesting. I'll just put it to you that way, as far as the growing up in that household. But as far as my mom and dad, I mean, they had 8 kids. They both had jobs. They both had a lot of stuff going on. I feel like they was just in survival mode most of the time. Like, man, we got for 8 mouths to feed and bills to pay. Like, we need to let's go, go, go. But they got the job done.
How did you feel being the oldest of 8? That's a lot of work for you as the older brother.
It should have been. It should have been. And I'll just go ahead and say, sorry, mom, sorry, dad, for not helping out more, because I was just like, man, I'm not really about all this crap. But there's just a lot. I mean, it's, just a lot of people in one house. But it was interesting and it was fun sometimes, but sometimes it was not so fun. But looking back on the way that I was raised and, the environment that I was raised in, I wouldn't change any of it. You know what I mean? Like it was unique. Not a lot of people grow up in a family of that size. It was very unique, and I wouldn't change any of it. Not one bit of it. It definitely kind of helped shape the person that I am today.
So what was the age difference between you being the oldest and your youngest sibling?
Bro, I knew you were gonna call me out on this, and I should know, but I. So let's see, probably about 15 to 20 years. I mean, they was going to town, true Irish Catholic fashion. Let's get these kids, let's get them going, one right after the other. So, the age span between from like sibling to sibling to sibling is only around sometimes as little as 1 year. Some are 2 to 3 years. But it was crazy. But it's tight enough to where I'm not completely totally out of touch with my youngest brother. And so it works out really well, dude. We're a pretty good group of folks, man.
What was it like going to a private school? I remember because I went to private school from kindergarten to 4th grade. Then after that, I didn't go to any more private schools. How did you like going to private school?
I didn't mind it. I wasn't particularly good at any of it, and that was by choice. It comes as no surprise to you because you know me, but probably a lot of people watching this don't. Obviously, I was a class clown the entire time. Always attention seeking, always cracking jokes, always disrupting things, just always acting a fool. Grades definitely reflected it. But as far as the difference between being in a public school or being in a private school, honestly, other than wearing a uniform every day, it was of no consequence to me that tuition was paid or we went for free. It was school. I really didn't know any better. I went to public school like kindergarten through 3rd grade. So I didn't really know any better. And I liked it. It was fine. Like I said, I probably should have done a little bit better, but whatever. It is what it is now. You know what I mean?
I mean, it is what it is now. You're still retired from the military. You're an airline pilot, so you're a pretty successful dude. One thing
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
One thing I have noticed, and I'm speaking from a business standpoint, and just when I was hiring employees and meeting a lot of people, I've noticed people that have gone to private schools, their work ethic is just a little bit, higher than people that go to public school. Nothing against public school people, because I'm a product of public schools myself. But I'm just talking about today's generation, the young adults that I met when I was hiring people. The ones that went to private school or a charter school, they really, really seemed like they had their stuff together. It was pretty impressive, and I could see a significant difference.
Okay, I would agree with you. However, I definitely feel that at the time I was probably the exception to that rule, bro.
Hey, there's an exception to every rule in life, right?
Oh, dude, I feel like my entire life I'm an exception to every rule. That's just kind of the way I am. I definitely sometimes march to the beat of my own drum, and sometimes to my own detriment. But hey, man, I'm me.
That's a good thing, though, man.
I don't mind it.
Matt living Matt's life. That's one thing I loved about you, man. When we're an alpha company and just us being friends, I knew without an inkling of a doubt Matt was gonna be Matt. He didn't give two shits what anybody thought.
Yeah, that is 100% accurate. And like I said, oftentimes to my own detriment. Um, I think I've been wearing my heart on my sleeve since I was born. And it's a blessing and a curse sometimes, especially being in the military. You can't always go tell people to go screw themselves. But yeah, here I am. Hey, bro, you need to fuck off, man. I'm just going to do what I want to do. It's kind of not how the military works.
Yeah, it definitely does it. But you'll find out one way or the other. You going to the military, was that something you always want to do?
No. When I was a kid growing up, I never even considered it until I had graduated from high school. I did know that I wanted to be a pilot from the time I was about 5 or 6 years old. I knew it. My dad used to take me out to the airport in Columbus, Ohio, and you could go up on top of the parking garage and you could plane spot up there. And I mean, I was like 6 years old at the time, so there was only like a couple, three of us Rugrats running around at the time. So he would devote time like, hey man, let's go to the airport. And it's pretty neat how, my dad's aspect of things, like he loves airplanes and he loves aviation, but he was an educator, still is an educator, been his whole life, high school teacher, principal, superintendent of schools, all these things. But dude loved him some airplanes. So anyway, he takes me up there one day and I remember very vividly watching this big old TWA plane, which is a completely defunct airline now, right? Passing by and I could like see the dude, in the cockpit, and I was like, that is the coolest shit I've ever seen in my life. So, but as far as the military is concerned, so I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Like I said, class clown, not even sure how the hell I graduated high school in the first place. Took some ACTs, whatever. And I started working at a temp agency in town. So like, they would just farm me out to all these factories and stuff. So I worked at like this metal coating place for, they coated like valve covers for Cadillacs up in Detroit. And then another day I worked at Procter & Gamble watching Tide go into freaking Tide bottles down in the assembly line and shit like that. Really monotonous, boring crap. I had talked to an Army recruiter. This is actually really funny shit, man. So this Army recruiter Cole calls me. And he wouldn't freaking leave me alone. Shocker, right? He's like, hey, man, come take the ASVAB. And I'm like, you know what? If I just take the ASVAB, maybe this guy will leave me alone, right? So I go in and I take the ASVAB. I don't remember what I scored. But he's like, hey, man, you can do whatever you want in the Army. And I was like, I want to be a pilot. And he's like, oh, we have this warrant officer thing. Like, you could be a pilot as a warrant officer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that sounds like a bunch of bullshit. There's no way. There's no way I can just leave high school and just start flying helicopters. I'm like, that's bullcrap, man. So he kept calling me. I just kept blowing him off. And then one day the temp agency sent me to a different factory where there are these huge suspension parts for school buses, and you had to pick them up out of these bins and put them on these racks. And they went through this different like coating process. They'd get dipped in all these tanks. Bruh, I probably weighed about 120 pounds at the time, if that, soaking ass wet. And these suspension parts were ridiculously heavy. And I remember picking these things up, and I'm like around like a bunch of like super blue collar dudes. Like, this is their bread and butter. Like, they work full time at the shop. This is how they make their money. I was completely slowing up the process. And I just had this epiphany. I'm like, I can't do this. This is how I'm going to spend the rest of my life, coating bus suspension parts. Nothing against people that do that, but I was slowing them up. They were getting super angry with me. And I remember we started work at like 5:30 in the morning and we worked till about 9. You get a 15-minute break. On that break, I took all my shit and I drove straight to the Navy recruiter. And I was like, I would like to join the Navy and I would like to do it right freaking now. And he's like, okay. And so that's how that all went down. And I'm obviously glad I did. I was in the delayed injury program for 6 days. 6
Damn.
days. So I rolled in there. I picked a job and at MEPS, and it was like, say, August 12th, 1992. And he's like, hey, your ship date's going to be August 18th. And I was like, dang, I'm going to be in DEP a whole year. And he's like, no, you're going to be in the delayed injury program for 6 days, man. And I was like, holy crap. So I went home and I told my parents, I'm like, hey, I joined the Navy. And I don't remember their reaction being very, like, it wasn't anything noteworthy. I mean, I'm sure it affected them. I'm sure they felt some type of way about it. But part of me, and I might be misspeaking here, but I have the feeling they were like, oh, thank God, man. All right, 1 down, 7 to go. And also Matt has figured out what the hell he wants to do with his life. And so off I went. That's kind of how that started.
Why the Navy?
Because I didn't believe the Army, dude. I didn't believe him. I was like, there's no way you can just leave high school and become an Army helicopter pilot. And so now, the story coming full circle the way that it did, I look back on that and I'm like, this is freaking hilarious, dude. You're so young and naive and you think you know everything. And this guy in the Army is telling you can be a helicopter pilot right now. And you're like, whatever, bro, you're lying.
As we know now, right? Because I never knew that either, but it's actually a real thing.
Yeah, I had no clue. Literally no clue. I just didn't believe him. And I can still see the guy's face. I can't remember his name. But I was like, man, this guy's selling me some snake oil, bro. You can't just go be in the Army helicopters right out of school, high school. There's no way. Clearly, that's not the freaking case. So it's pretty funny to me now how that all panned out. But as far as the Navy, I don't know why I picked him. I think it was kind of a lot of, this is 1992. Top Gun had been out about 6 years, and the recruiter that I had at the Navy, he was one of them dudes that's on the aircraft carrier in yellow vest, waving the airplanes around. And I thought that was sexy as hell. I was like, I want to do that. Which, come to find out, is literally one of the hardest jobs in naval aviation. Like, those guys work ridiculous long hours, clearly working on the roof of a flight deck or on an aircraft carrier is some super dangerous shit, right? But when I went to MEPS, they didn't have that. They were like, that job is not available. And I'm like, well, what is available? And so I read a couple jobs. Like, I was like, oh, engine mechanic. I'll just work on engines. And he's like, all right, the guy's typing in his computer. He's like, not available anymore. Aviation electrician. Yeah, that sounds cool. Whatever, dude. If there's planes involved, I don't care. I love airplanes. He types it in. That's not available. And he's like, well, we had this other job called aircrew survival equipment. It's the short term for it is called parachute rigger. And I'm like, what's that all about? And he's like, oh, you take care of all their flight equipment. You work on like the oxygen regulators in the airplanes. You pack parachutes. Blah, blah, blah. And the guy who's like, look, dude, this is one of the best jobs in naval aviation. Everybody loves you. And I'm like, well, yeah, is it because you like take care of all the crap that would help them out in a crash? And he's like, no, it's because you have sewing machines in your shop and you can just trade away all kinds of crap. If you sew this for one dude, he'll bring you this or blah, blah, blah. He goes, it is the best job. And I'm not bullshitting you. And I'm like, well, it's really the only thing left available right now. So I guess I'll take it, whatever, man. And so that's how I became a parachute rigger in the Navy.
Who are some of your most influential people while you're growing up?
My grandpa, for sure. He was, how you could not love anybody in the Greatest Generation is beyond me. He was a absolute badass. The guy to me was indestructible. He was a good dude. My dad, my mom, I know they both worked very, very hard to, raise 8 children. and also be successful in their own lives. So, I looked up to them quite a bit. But I think first and foremost would be my grandpa. He was a freaking stud, dude, and an absolute saint in my eyes. Always will be. Just a great, great guy.
Are you first generation military?
Yes, I am.
You are. Now, what did your mom do for a living?
So, mom, um, she did a lot of, I don't want to say odd jobs, but she did like secretary work for different places, all kinds of different places. When I was really, really young, she was a secretary at a funeral home. And so that was kind of interesting because, you know, there'd be times where dad would have to drop me off at her work or vice versa. And so I just go in this funeral home and wait for mom to get done for work. And, kids being curious, kind of just wandering around, and you walk into these dark ass rooms and there's like caskets and shit in there. I'm like, this is creepy, bro. But I heard that sticks out very well. She also was a secretary for an ophthalmologist. She was a secretary for a cement mixing company, which was I thought that was really cool because like the trucks would come in and they had these buttons they push and all the stuff would go in the trucks. I thought that was kind of neat. And then she started pursuing her degree at Ohio State University as a mother of 8 kids, college freshman. Pretty neat. And she's a therapist now. But she did not start her education and stuff for all that until after all 8 of us were already, in the world. So that's a pretty big deal. And then my dad, he just right out of college has been an educator.
Shout out to both your parents, man. I mean, your dad holding it down straight out of college, your mom never giving up, chasing her dreams. Watching your parents work that hard, staying together for 25 plus years, raising 8 kids. How did that shape you to the man you are today and help influence your family?
I knew they worked incredibly hard, and I knew that nothing in life is just given to you. And that kind of resonated with me. You know what I mean? I don't ever remember a time where I thought that anything would ever just be handed to me, or we clearly were not a family of privilege, if you will. They were constantly scraping to make ends meet. And so that stuck a lot with me, like I thought that's what real life was like. And it is. It doesn't matter if, where you come from, what your background is. If you want something, the majority of the time, unless you're a super privileged dude or chica, you got to put the work in.
So you signed up for the Navy. How old are you when you joined the Navy?
I was 18, dude. I think so. I was August of 92. I think we graduated in like May, June of 92. So I was farting around with that temp agency for, like a couple months. And then, dude, light bulb comes on over Maddie's head. It's time to get the hell out of here and get a real job because this shit ain't.
What do they call it for the Navy? Boot camp, basic training?
Yeah, it's called a couple of different things. Yeah, boot camp or basic training, but the actual place is called Recruit Training Command, or RTC is the abbreviation. Mine was in San Diego, California. At the time, much like the Army, the Navy had a couple of 3 different places where you could go to boot camp, and I feel like there was one in Chicago, and that's like the only one that they have today. And I'm like, I'll probably just go to Chicago, whatever. And they're like, no, you're going to California. And I was like, man, these fools are sending me as far away from home as possible. Which, whatever, it didn't matter. Honestly, the only thing I cared about when it was time to go to boot camp was like, holy crap, I get to ride in an airplane. And it's a long airplane ride, and I can't wait. I remember that very, very vividly.
Was this your first time being away from home?
Yes, it was. So when my parents dropped me off to the hotel, the night prior to shipping out, the night prior to that, instead of staying home with my family, of course, I went out with my friends, partied way too hard, super, super hungover. And so my dad wanted to make a day of it. Hey, let's go down to Columbus, because I left from Columbus, which is a couple hours away from where I grew up. And he's like, oh, hey, man, there's a Anheuser-Busch brewery down here. We should go tour it or whatever. And I'm like, the last thing I want to look at or smell or be around is freaking beer. And I remember him pulling up to this brewery in our shitbox Dodge van and smelling that beer being made. And I was like, I don't know if I can go inside there, man. I think I'm gonna throw up, dude. That sticks out pretty vividly in my mind. But then they dropped me off at the hotel, and they're like, okay, well, I guess this is it. And boy, when that door closed behind them, I was like, what the hell? You know, we all go through it. You're like, oh my gosh, like this is it. The cord has been cut. It's time to go be a grown up now. And this ain't too good with me, man. I don't know. I made a mistake, you know. So, but you know, I think all of us go through that when we join the military. A lot of self doubt, and you know, am I doing the right thing? But I got over that real quick.
So you show up in San Diego. What was that whole experience like?
So show up there, and I, you know, having never gone through Army basic, I'm trying to equate it because this is obviously largely a Army audience. You know what I mean? Same thing. You go through some reception, they strip you of all your clothes, all that nonsense, and throw you in this like little receiving barracks. And you're just waiting for more people to show up. And then throughout the course of the night, more people show up. You get your shots, you know, drug test, blah, blah, blah. And then they form you up into a company, and you just start. And you know, just pretty typical stuff. Hey, man, this is how the Navy works. This is how your pay works. This is our customs, courtesies, and traditions. We're going to teach you how to fight the fires on ships, little aviation classes, some surface warfare classes, some subsurface warfare classes, just, you know, stuff like that. And it was 8 weeks. And I remember it felt like it was forever. But I enjoyed it. The more that I started getting into it, and especially when the aviation classes came around, because you know how that crap rolls in boot camp, dude. Like you're always tired, you know, getting PT'd all the time, whatever, and barely staying awake in class. But with the days that they would talk about aviation, dude, you could have beat me to death the night prior. I was staying awake for that stuff. I was just blown away.
How did you do in basic? Any accolades? Were you just, you know, flying the wall, flying underneath the radar?
No, dude, just a fly on the wall. I had nothing really noteworthy. To be perfectly honest, you know, I was just like, I'm just glad I made it through this, man. And not that it was overly difficult. It was just a huge lifestyle change, as it is for anybody that goes, you know, that's your first, you know, introduction to the military and the way that that lifestyle goes. So not an easy transition by any means for anybody. It wasn't for me. But I was just like, dude, just these people, they do a lot of yelling. They make you do push-ups and stuff. They'll run you to death. Like, just keep the blinders on. Don't do anything to draw any attention to yourself, and let's just let's get this done and get the hell out of here, man. Like, I just want to get out of here. And it wasn't because I disliked it. It's because I was like, this is one step closer to putting my paws on some airplanes, man. So I got to get this done. So that's kind of how I looked at it.
What created the fascination with airplanes? Was it you on top of that building, or was it something else?
100%, dude. It is one of the most vivid memories in my mind, even to this day. I mean, and to be that young and to know that is what I want to do. I just didn't know how to get there. But I just knew it, you know. At first I was like, I want to be a pilot. And then, you know, then I joined the Navy. I was like, well, I probably am not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't have the education right now to do it. So I'm going to go try this for a little bit and just kind of see how that works. And then we'll just see what happens, you know. And I'm sure there's a gazillion people that will watch this. Actually, probably people be watching this like, Matt Cole, I'm not watching that goofball. But the few that do watch it will probably be like, yep, I can relate, man. You know, I'm going to do this initial enlistment and then I'm going to get out. I'll do this. And then you're like, and then they dangle a little carrot in front of your face, right? Like, you know, maybe a little re-enlistment bonus, maybe a little reclassification of jobs, whatever. You're like, well, I'll try that for 4 years and see what happens. And that's just what I kept doing. And the next thing I know, I was like, what the hell happened to the last 20 years of my life? So, yeah, it's kind of how that all worked out. But I always knew that it would involve airplanes in some capacity.
After basic training, where do you guys go next in the Navy?
Our AIT is called A School. And my A School was at Naval Air Station, Millington, Tennessee, which is not too far down the road on 40 from where you're at right now. It is, that installation is still there, but it is, it's the Navy's version of Human Resources Command is there now. But yeah, back in '92, there were all of the aviation, or the majority of the aviation jobs for the Navy, their A schools were in Memphis. So I went there and
How was that?
loved it. Loved it. I did. And I wasn't touching any airplanes. I was touching parachutes and life rafts and survival vests and helmets and oxygen masks. But it was fun. I really, really enjoyed the training. It was not, Navy A School is not like Army AIT. You don't have drill instructors. You just have instructors for the different phases of training, but they're not always all up in your shit. You march 2 from the barracks on your own. You went 8 on your own as a class, I should say. But you did not have the constant oversight of a drill instructor. You just had the people that taught you, hey, dude, this is how you pack this parachute. This is how you use this sewing machine. This is how you work on this helmet, or whatever the case may be. But I can't remember disliking any of it because, again, much like when I was getting ready to leave boot camp, I was like, this is it. This is the next step. And the next thing is you're almost there. As soon as you get this crap done, you're going to go to a squadron, and then you're finally going to put your knee hooks on a plane, and it's going to be awesome. I remember that very good.
Did you guys have oversight, like a curfew or anything? Or
It was all seniority based, so like when you would show up, you couldn't do anything. You had to wear a uniform all the time, and then you're there for whatever weeks or months, and they're like, okay, you can start wearing civilian clothes. You can start going off base. And then their leave and pass is called Liberty. It's an old, term from ships. When you got off the ship, you went on Liberty. So you would start getting off base Liberty. If you had a car at a certain point, you could bring your car and all that kind of stuff. It definitely wasn't as lockstep and as strict as the Army was, for sure.
what was your rank at A School?
I was an E1 all the way until I got to my first squadron. So I was a Joe Nobody for an E1, man.
So you show up to your, what do they call it? Your first duty station. I'll just call it duty station because I'm not sure what the Navy calls them, but correct me at any time. Where'd you go first?
I went to Patrol Squadron 10, the Mighty Mighty Red Lancers. And they were home based in Naval Air Station, Brunswick, Maine. And when I showed up, the squadron was on a deployment to Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico. So I showed up, and they had like a little, rear detachment, and they're like, hey, man, here's the deal. Everybody's down Roosevelt Roads, but we have 2 planes that are up here that are going through a phase inspection, and we're going to put you in one of those planes and send you down to Roosevelt Roads as soon as the phase is complete. Mind blown. I was like, so first of all, I'm going to Puerto Rico. Second of all, I get to go there in this airplane, which the Patrol Squadron 10 flew P-3 Orion, sub-hunting and surveillance planes. And so, yeah, I showed up, and I think we were there for like a week. So I was just staying in like a transient barracks and just helping out. I'm like, hey, I'm a parachute rigger. So I'm thinking immediately I'm going to just be launched into this, taking care of all the survival equipment and shit. And they're like, nope. So you'll sweep the hangar floor like 10 times a day. And I was like, well, just sitting there pushing this broom. I'm like, well, around all these planes, this is cool enough. This is cool enough for me. And then it got to the point where, all these people that were back working, doing these phase inspections on these airplanes were like, hey, man, you can only sweep the hangar floor so many times. Like, come over here and hand me some tools, or do this or do that. And I was like, you mean I get to like touch the airplane? And like, yeah, dude, like what the fuck do you think? And I'm like, oh my God. So it was a big deal. So I was, I was working with this engine mechanic. His name's Daniel Murphy. I'll never forget Murph. Great guy. Like, hey, idiot, get over here and help me out with this stuff. And I was like, all right. So, and he's up in the landing gear wheel well of this airplane, and there's these big inspection plates in there, and you pull these inspection plates off, and you can see the turbine section of the engine. So he was inspecting the turbine section of the engine, and he's like, hey man, I'm all done. Put these inspection plates back on. And I'm like, well, I'm not a parachute guy. He's like, I don't give a fuck what you are, man. Just do it. Like, okay. So I reach up there to go put this plate back on, and it's got like a V-band clamp around it, and then you put the nut on. And so I'm holding it, and I got this nut, and I'm going to kind of readjust myself on this ladder to put this plate on, and I dropped the nut in the inspection hole, and it went down into the bottom of the engine. And I'm like, well, that's it. Getting kicked out of the Navy today. Been here for 3 days, and I was just beside myself. And I was like almost in tears. And I told him, I was like, Murph, I really screwed up. And he's like, you're good, man. The old boy just fishes out a magnet, clink, gets the nut. He's like, don't do that again. But it's funny to me now, because I thought, like, you just ruined this, $1 billion airplane, which a P3 obviously doesn't cost that much. I didn't know any better, but yeah, I thought I ruined the damn airplane. Like my first couple of days in the Navy, they're pretty funny shit. But yeah, we did all that, finished up the phase inspections, and then there was a series of engine runs that needed to be done. Some just at idle power, and others that had to be done like at full operating RPM. And to do that, I had to taxi the airplane out to this remote area of the airfield, put the parking brake on and just freaking let it rip, man. And they were like, hey, do you want to go with us? And I was like, for what? And they're like, oh, no, we'll get in the airplane and then taxi the rig out. And I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe it. I just thought it was the neatest thing ever. So that was my first experience dealing with any military pilot. So, the pilots show up because they got to taxi the plane, and they're like, dude, naval aviators pedestal, bro. Like, they were just absolute gods to me. And I remember these two dudes. I could see their faces. Yeah, one of the guys, he flies for FedEx. His name is Chris. I still talk to him on a regular basis. And I was like, hey, do you remember this? And he's like, no. I'm like, it was everything to me, dude. Like, it was the coolest thing ever. So, like, I got to sit behind him up on the flight deck, and they taxi the plane out, and there's a flight engineer running the engines up and down. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. I was like, I made it to the big leagues. I'm here, The pretty neat shit, man. So then we do all that, and then they're like, hey, it's time to go to Puerto Rico. And they're like, you'll be flying in this P3 down to Puerto Rico. Again, mind blown. I was like, I can't believe they're letting me do this. I feel so fortunate, blah, blah, blah. Yep, went down to Puerto Rico. We were there for 6 months. My seat was literally the worst seat in the plane. It wasn't a seat, dude. It was, when you come off the boarding ladder of a P3, on the left-hand side, there is a seatbelt literally bolted to the floor. It is the worst seat. I'm an E1, got it. This is where I will be sitting. And yeah, so they were like, hey man, get in, sit down on the floor, and put that seatbelt on. And you can't see, there's no windows, like you can see nothing. And so the plane takes off and stuff, and I'm sitting there because I don't know, I'm only doing what I'm told. And I'm probably sitting on that floor right next to this door, which was not sealed up very well, for like an hour and a half, it felt like. And I'm just sitting there because no one's told me to do anything. Everybody else is getting up. They're back in the galley, like cooking food and shooting shit. And I'm just sitting there. And finally, somebody's like, hey, man, you can get up. And I was like, okay. So I get up, and then I'm just standing there like, I have no clue what to do. And they're like, hey, did you want to go up front? And I'm like, you mean of the airplane? And they're like, yeah, idiot, of the airplane. Like, yeah, you can go up front and sit up there with the pilots. And so once I was afforded that opportunity, my ass didn't leave that until they told me to go back and sit down because we were landing. And that was like, oh my God. I mean, it was just the coolest thing ever to me. It was a I can't remember how long it took to make Puerto Rico to P3. Like it took some time. I mean, it was in excess of 6 hours for sure. I can't remember exactly how long it took to get there, but it was going on into the night, and we were flying through clouds, and the St. Elmo's fire was hitting the windscreen, and I'd never seen that before. I thought that was amazing. It's like a phenomenon where the nose of the airplane or pieces on the front of the airplane will collect a bunch of static charge on them, and then it finally discharges, and it comes out in these huge flashes of lightning all over the windscreen. I was fascinated by it. And I remember the pilot, Chris, saying, he's like, dude, he goes, I've been flying for a long time, and I've never seen St. Elmo's fire this good. Like, you picked a good day to go fly. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty neat. But yeah, we got down there, and I was there for like, I think 5 months. I think they were a month into a 6-month-long deployment when I joined the squadron. And my first job was working in the snack bar, making coffee and crap. And then I finally, got to go onto my shop later after a brief stint in what's called the line division. And that is all strictly plane handling. So you're marshaling airplanes in and out of parking spots, doing fuel samples, doing, kind of grunt work. But I didn't care. I was touching planes, dude. I thought it was awesome.
Where is that located in Puerto Rico?
Saba. Yep. So, Luquillo Beach was a big hangout for us. We went down to Old San Juan every once in a great while. But honestly, I was a nerd, bro. Like I was just, hey man, let's go down to Old San Juan get some beers and shit. I'm like, nah, man, I think I'm gonna stay at work and mess with the airplanes. And they're like, you're stupid, bro. Like, you're stupid. And then I started bumming rides. I started befriending a lot of the systems operators on the airplane, flight engineers. And I was like, hey man, do you think I could go flying with you guys? And they're like, why? I was like, cause it's cool. And they're like, it's not cool. I'm like, yes, it is.
What was your most memorable moment at Roosevelt Roads?
Watching those crews operate, and and they were rostered together for like the majority of the deployment. I mean, obviously people change crews if a guy went on leave or was sick or whatever the case may be, but those crews operated autonomously throughout the course of the deployment, so they got really tight. And watching them all work together, and our primary mission down there was busting guys running drugs. It was all maritime patrol. There was no anti-submarine warfare down there, really. So watching them bust drug runners, and then they'd get all these pictures. Like they'd do like a big bust, and the whole crew would go down, and they'd be posing on these massive stacks of bales of freaking coke and weed and stuff. Like, oh, look what we did. I thought that was neat. The pictures were neat in and of themselves, but there's about 12 people on a P3 Orion crew, and they just operated as one. And I'm like, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, I think I could do that. I think I'm smart enough to do this. And then, so that sets up the next stage, well, if those guys could do it, I can do it. And so that was pretty memorable to me. Just knowing that I could definitely operate the way that those guys are operating. And I wanted to, because as you've operated with a tight knit crew, it's one of the most rewarding experiences you can have as an aviator. And I was like, not that I wasn't already sold. I was like, I'm really sold on this aviation shit, dude. I really, really want to take this to the next level when I'm afforded the opportunity.
What was your biggest takeaway from that deployment?
The fact that I could do what those guys were doing. That I was, I kind of built the confidence to do what those guys were doing, because like I said before, first time I ever met a Navy pilot, they're just gods. And I felt the same way about the systems and sensor operators in the airplane. I just thought they seemed untouchable to me, but the more I worked with them and the more I partied with them and socialized with them, and I was like, they're just dudes and chicks, man. They're just normal human beings. So you can do that. You could do that if you wanted to. You have the smarts and you have the capabilities between your two big ass ears to do what those people are doing. So that was my biggest takeaway from that. And then I knew I kind of wanted to take it to some kind of next level. I just wasn't sure how at that point, but I'm like, I wasn't worried about that. I was like, I'll figure that out later on down the road. I still owe these people this time working in this particular area. So I'll worry about that crap later.
Yeah, were you still at E1 at this time?
When I left Roosevelt Roads, I had made it to E3.
You leave Roosevelt Roads. Do you go back to Maine, or where do you go next?
Yeah, we went back to Maine for a year. And by then I was full-time in the survival equipment shop. And so just, working on all the survival equipment systems. And then in our particular shop, we also had a different group, a different MOS of people. But because our jobs were so closely related, we were all in the same shop. And those guys and gals worked on the air conditioning and pressurization systems of the aircraft. And they didn't care what your MOS was. Like, if you're in that shop, you're doing that crap. And I thought it was, again, fascinating. I'm like, okay, this is more chances to like actually wrench on planes, figure out how all this crap works. I mean, you're like literally tearing into the inner workings of these air conditioning and pressurization systems. And this is like 1950s technology. And those planes were not exactly user friendly. I don't know what the engineers were thinking when they made P3s, but they definitely did not have a maintainer in mind. It didn't seem like to me. So working on those systems was not easy, but it was a great challenge. I really enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it more than working on all the life rafts and the parachutes and stuff. I mean, because you're out there getting dirty and, running APUs on your own to, energize the air conditioning system, the pressurization system. I loved it. I was, and again, it's that whole time that I was in that first squadron of mine, I just felt like, I can't believe that they're letting this silly ass kid from freaking Lima, Ohio, touch these airplanes, and not only touch them, but like actually fix them. And it was very, very, very rewarding. I freaking loved it, man. It was awesome.
What was your biggest takeaway from that first duty station?
Definitely that I had the wherewithal and the smarts to take it to the next level, which in my particular mind at that time was, I want to be a naval air crewman. I want to be a sensor operator in this plane. I want to be, actually it was like flight engineer. I was like, I'd love to be a flight engineer on the P3 or a sensor operator. They also had in-flight aviation ordnancemen, which all those sonar buoys that P3 shoot out, they are responsible for loading those, the P3 carried mines, carried torpedoes, bomb, all kinds of crap. So they were in charge of all that kind of stuff. And I was like, all these are cool to me. I don't give a crap which job it is, as long as I can be a naval air crewman. This is the next step that I want to take. And when the time comes, and I'm sure that it will, I will figure that out. So that was my biggest takeaway out of that squadron.
So where do you head next?
I was still in that squadron. We did a deployment to Sicily, and then when we came back from Sicily, I went and worked at the intermediate level of maintenance, which was not part of the squadron, but it was on survival equipment. So now you're like packing the parachutes instead of just inspecting them in the airplane, life rafts, and like tearing apart oxygen regulators and fixing them, and life preservers and stuff like that. And when I was there, I was reading the Navy's version of Human Resources Command put out a magazine called The Link Magazine, and it has all the different MOSs in it, and their detailers, which is basically a term for branch manager, would put notes in there about what's going on with that particular MOS. And I read in there that the airborne mine countermeasures community, which flew MH-53 Sea Dragons, needed air crewmen. And they list, they're called source ratings. So MOS in the Navy is called rating instead of MOS. So they're like, a source rating to become a naval air crewman. If you possess this rating, you are eligible for this naval air crewman. So airborne mine countermeasures needs people to fly in the back of these rigs, and PR, which was the short term for my rating, was one of the source ratings. And I was like, here we go, I'm doing it. So I filled out the paperwork and I submitted it, and it wasn't very long until my chief called me up, my E7, and he's like, Matt, we need you to come back to the squadron. And I'm like, okay, what's up? And he's like, you're leaving. You're gonna go be an aircrewman on MH-53. And I was like, oh my god, yeah. I was like, all right, man, here we go, next chapter, bro, next chapter. So
What was your biggest takeaway from that first chapter of the Navy?
that you can do whatever you want if you put it in. If you put in the work, you can get, you can do whatever you want in the military as long as you put in the work, you show some drive, some determination, tenacity, whatever you want to call it. If there's something out there that you want, you got to reach out there and grab it. But the grab and the reach always, it might not be that easy.
So you're starting to realize that you essentially control your destiny.
100%, because much like a lot of first termers, I was really having a good time, but I was like, oh, I'm probably just gonna do this for 4 years and get out. And everybody says that. I knew in the back of my mind, like, you're a freaking lifer, dude. Like, what? You're gonna stay in. But I just didn't know. Then I read that magazine, I saw that thing, and I was like, all right, man, here we go. We are off on the next adventure.
My story is very similar to yours. Where I was on my first term, I was about to get out, and then last minute I re-enlisted, and then I would say it was probably 2 months after I re-enlisted that I had that aha moment that I could become a Black Hawk pilot. And just like you, I put every ounce of strength, wisdom, everything into becoming a Black Hawk pilot until I made it happen, and it came true.
Well, it's a good thing, because if you didn't, the Big Santi Express would have never left the station. We can't be having that now.
All right, so where do you go for your new rating?
So I actually kept the same rating. I just added a code on, so it's kind of like tracking, IP or whatever, or safety. That's kind of the best way to explain it. So, to abbreviate it, I went down to Pensacola, Florida for 6 weeks, and they just PT the dog shit out of you and make sure that you can swim and do some helo dunker training and, water egress training. Did that. And then I went to, a school up in Norfolk, Virginia, where they teach you how to deploy all of the different, mine countermeasure systems out of the back of the aircraft. SEER school was attached on the back end of that too. Very religious experience. I did that up in Maine in February, so that was very, very interesting. It was, to this day, the most rewarding school that I've ever been to. And clearly we all signed bunches of NDAs and stuff like that, but the way that they did it, the end, when you know that it is over, dude, you've seen it a gazillion times. I don't care who you are. You're crying, man. It was amazing. And I didn't like it, but I loved it at the same time. Probably the most rewarding education that I got in the military.
It's probably one of the most hardest schools you will encounter in the military, just because what we're doing there, and then the whole process of it. But it is the most challenging school, I think, in the military.
Well, and I think that's what probably makes it the most rewarding, right? And I'm sure people that have gone through other military schools that are not very easy would probably disagree, and that's okay, But to sum it all up, if the juice is worth the squeeze at the end, the harder you got to squeeze, the better the juice is, dude. That was kind of my takeaway from.
And it's not hard from a physical standpoint. It's more of a mental standpoint, right? So I think that's where it separates it from, the buds training and all those high speed schools. It's just a different level of mental tenacity, I would say.
I enjoyed the challenge. I don't think I did at the time, but when you get done and the training facility in Maine is like way out of sticks somewhere. It's not near the base that where their administrative department is. So it's a long ride up, it's a long ride back, and on the ride back, right before I passed the fuck out because I was tired as hell. I just remember thinking, you know, about all the, it really makes you think about all the people who were prisoners of war and all that kind of stuff. And the drive, the tenacity, the resiliency, that gets instilled at you at a school like that. And it's just, that really hit home. I was like, man, this is cool, man. And you did it. Good for you. So I get done with that. And then I start to actually get to fly in the back of the H-53. And that was actually done at a Marine Corps squadron, which is right down the road from where I live now in North Carolina. So this was at Marine Corps Air Station, New River, North Carolina, which is right across the New River from Camp Lejeune. The Navy at the time did not have an H-53 training squadron. They got rid of theirs. And what they did is they took a couple of MH-53s. They put them in this Marine Corps training squadron with a very small detachment of Navy instructors, Navy maintainers, and they just taught us everything that there was to know about the 53. And then you do, like 5-10 flights or whatever the hell it is. And then I was designated a naval air crewman. They gave me a little set of gold wings. I thought I was the shit, I was like, all right, man, like next chapter, like goal achieved. And then I went to my squadron, my next squadron.
So you had to learn all the systems of the aircraft. Looking back, as you being a Black Hawk pilot, because the 53 built by the same company, am I correct?
Yeah, they're both fine Sikorsky products. The H-53E is by far one of the nastiest machines that I've ever put my hands on. One, it's a leaker. That old adage, if it ain't leaking, it's empty, is very true in H-53. It leaks so much so, in fact, in the cabin, there are reservoirs to replenish all of the hydraulic systems and engine oil in flight. That's how bad that bitch leaks. It's crazy, bro. And the head, the rotor head, also had oil in it. You had to go put oil in the main rotor head where I don't have to get too technical, but like where all the moving parts were as far as the blades, like sleeve and spindle assemblies, which is just where the blade kind of goes into the root. That needed to be oiled. Hinge pins needed to be oiled. Like it was not like the Black Hawk. Also, it was similar in design as far as the root design of the rotor system. But other than that, that's probably about it. And I'm telling you, dude, nasty. You were just constantly covered in fucking carcinogens, bro, all the time. Yeah. But with that being said, dude, this thing is massive. I mean, it is 99 feet long. It is huge. Main rotor diameter of 80 feet. It is a beast. And for whatever reason, I remember, I think the max gross takeoff weight of MH-53 is 69,745 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So if you take that number and you subtract the basic operating weight, in theory, an H-53 can lift 20 tons. 20 tons. Unreal.
Being a helicopter pilot, I mean, just a pure, science behind that thing flying is ridiculous, man.
They're beasts, dude. Absolute beasts. And I was just, again, fascinated. Could not get enough. Except the difference now was it was my job to fly in. And I was like, yes. So, but I can't say that anything changed from me bumming rides, because I would go to our ops department and be like, put me on the schedule again. Put me on the schedule again. Put me on the schedule again. I couldn't get enough of that shit. And there's a little jump seat in between the two pilots. I just flip that thing out and just sit there and watch these dudes do their work. If we were just kind of out booming around, if we were doing my countermeasures crap, I had my own things to do at the back. And to make it as abbreviated as possible, there's all these different kind of mines that get set off by different things: acoustic signatures of ships, magnetic signatures of ships, or them old ball and chain ones you see on the old movies with the spikes coming out, which are contact mines. And we had a whole bunch of different kinds of systems that could find those mines, and in some instances there were some of the systems could actually neutralize the mines, but they were all on cables. So the whole back of the aircraft was full of winches, a lot of cables, like a high tension. You're dragging this shit through the water. It was not the safest adventure, I would say. To be in a helicopter where you're literally attached to the water by tons of cables and stuff. But they had emergency stuff in case something happened with the aircraft to get rid of all of it relatively quickly. But if I didn't have to do that and we were just out doing familiarization flights for the pilots, I was in that jump seat watching them 100% of the time. And that's when I was like, hey, these guys are not smarter than me. These guys are not better than me. And I'm not trying to take anything away from the dudes who I flew with, the pilots that I flew with. They're all great guys, gals. But another light bulb comes on over my head. I'm like, I can do this. I can do what these guys are doing. And I was like, again, here I am. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. But now I have the confidence to know, having watched these guys and gals do it, that I can do that too. I just don't know how to get there yet. So
by this time, how long are you in the Navy?
Probably about 5 years. 5 years when I got to that squadron, which was called Helicopter Mine Countermeasures Squadron 15. The mighty Blackhawks, stationed down at Naval Air Station, Corpus Christi, Texas. They've since changed their home port to Norfolk.
And what was your rank at the time?
I left there as an E5, so that would be Petty Officer Second Class. Still a PR, but a second class Petty Officer, so E5.
Now, at this time, are you married? Any children yet?
That is where I met Francine, in Corpus Christi, Texas. Yep, God bless her. She's still keeping me around. I can't believe it, man.
How'd you meet?
Her mother introduced us, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, so this was back in the day of America Online was a huge deal, You got mail. And so we had these little Corpus Christi chat rooms, and we'd be in there hacking away, blah, blah, blah. And her mom was kind of like the moderator for this chat room. And she's like, hey, we're going to have this meet and greet at this bar. And one of the guys in my shop, he was also a big AOL nerd like me. And he's like, dude, let's go. I was like, dude, there's a bunch of nerds. And he's like, yeah, but we'll already be in downtown Corpus. So if it sucks, we'll just go out to the bar and we'll go out to another bar, whatever. So we went. I met Francine's mom there, and she just started ranting and raving about her kid. And she's got a daughter and blah, blah, blah. And I just think you guys would be great. And, so anyway, we have another meet and greet, and Francine comes to it. And when she walked in, I was like, that's my wife right there. I freaking knew. I don't know what it was. I just knew. But she wouldn't pay me no mind, bro. No mind. I was like, hey, I introduced myself. She's like, yeah. So her daughter, who is now my daughter, obviously, Megan, just this little short, curly-haired kid bebopping around in this bar. I mean, we're just, you don't get more Texas than that. Take your kid to the bar, right? But it was early in the day. It wasn't like it was like late. So it was pretty early in the day. And she's running around talking to everybody and stuff, just being Megan. And I was like, you know what? I know how I want to get this girl's attention. I'm going to go get that little girl something to drink. So I go and I get this orange juice and shit. And I'm sitting down at this table, and here comes Megan. And I go to give her this orange juice, the little straw on the thing. And Megan goes to reach for that shit. And, now looking back on it from Francine's perspective, she was like, probably, what is this freaking psycho doing? I don't know this guy. And he's just giving my kid some shit. I don't know what's in there, So that got her attention. Got her attention real quick. And the rest is history, dude. We dated for probably about 6 months. And I was like, I proposed, and that was that.
And this happened in Corpus Christi. How long were you there for?
4 years. We were there for 4 years. And while I was there, obviously, not only did I meet Francine, I got married. And then military wise, we went out on out on the boat a couple times. I went out on the USS Denver for like a month. That was my first time ever being on a Navy ship. And I remember that very vividly. I thought it was awesome. And then we went out on a 6-month deployment on the USS Incheon, which used to be an amphibious assault ship, but it was converted to a mine countermeasures command and control ship. So we were part of a little group of ships that went and we went all over the Med and just did exercises. And I don't get me wrong, I love P3s. I love that community. I love that lifestyle. But being on that ship, I was like, this is a real Navy, dude. You are in a real Navy right now. Like, this is freaking awesome. And a lot of people hate the boat. Like, this sucks. I'm like, you're in the Navy. What do you?
How long were you on that boat for?
The Incheon, that was a 6-month gig. And yeah, we came home and hung out for a little while. Can't remember exactly how long. And then it was time to negotiate for orders again. And, you know, in the back of my mind, I just still kind of had to, like, what am I going to do next? But being at HM-15, it's a seagoing squadron, and you work, and those aircraft are so maintenance intensive. I mean, you're talking like 45, 55 maintenance man hours per one flight hour. It's a no joke deal. You work very, very hard. So I knew that I wanted to do something. I just didn't have the time to do it. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be on shore duty here pretty soon. That place is definitely affords folks opportunities to go to college, pursue other interests, whatever the case may be. I'm like, I'll worry about it after I go on to shore duty.
What was your biggest takeaway from being at Corpus Christi?
The things that I had seen when I was in VP-10, as far as how crews operate to achieve a goal of mission success, that I looked at from outside and wanted to be a part of, I was now a part of it. And, you know, like I was saying, those aircraft are very maintenance intensive. It's definitely an all hands on deck effort to meet the requirements of the following day's flight schedule and fixing the aircraft, functionally check flying the aircraft, which I did a lot of. But now here I was before looking on the outside in at these people achieving this mission success. And now I was a very integral part of it. And I was just like, man, this is cool. But still, I know I can do something else. I know I can take it to the next step. What are we going to do next? I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
Now, that being your first ship rotation or ship deployment, what was your biggest takeaway, most memorable moment from that experience?
Being in the shipping lanes in the middle of the night with no light pollution and looking at a Russian cargo ship literally 10 miles away, and you can see some dude smoking a cigarette. You can see the cherry of his cigarette. The phosphorescent wake that gets kicked up by your own ship, it just glows in the dark for miles behind the ship. It was very surreal to sit there and watch it. And you could go, you could go watch it whenever you wanted. It wasn't like you had to buy tickets to one of the best shows on earth, shooting stars everywhere else. I mean, it was a magical world to me. And it was also very strange to me how many disgruntled people were on the ship. They're like, this sucks. And I'm like, it only sucks if you make it suck. First of all, you got all this awesome shit. We're freaking flying helicopters every day. Even if it just is in circles doing touch and goes on the boat in the middle of the ocean, we're still flying. It's fun. The commute to work, very, very short. Just go up a couple of stairs and you're at work. It was the total Navy package, dude. You got the surface element of the Navy, and you've got the aviation part of it, and you're just so deeply immersed into both. I was like, this is great. I never understood people that didn't like the boat.
How dark is it out there in the middle of nowhere?
It's fucking dark, dude. It's dark. But the thing that the cool thing about it being that there's no city lights or anything to be reflecting off clouds and stuff. So while it's super, super dark, the things that you can actually see are amazing. Especially like as far as like stars and, you know, that dude smoking a cigarette or whatever, and he's on a ship that's just so far away from you, you can see it because there's none of that light pollution. Just was utterly fascinating to me. And I'll never forget it. And to me, it was this magical world that I was like, I can't believe that I get to be a part of this. And I know some of my Navy buddies are probably going to end up watching. I was like, dude, you're such a dork. Well, you know, I've always been a dork when it comes to crap like this. Like, you know, you can You can hate being on the boat because the food sucks, or I'm away from home, or blah blah blah. If that's how you want to act for 6 months, bro, knock yourself out. You're going to be miserable. Or even go out on the flight deck at night when no one's flying, and you can take in all this shit that 99% of the population doesn't get to see, or more. It's your call, man.
I've never been on a Navy ship, and that's something I have always wanted to do, just to go check it out, see how you guys live on there, see the operations, just walk around. But I always thought I was never an advocate of the Navy. I'm an Army guy, true and true. But anytime I was around those ships, I was like, damn, those things are humongous. I wonder what life would be like on one of those boats, those ships. Yeah, people like to tell their stories, man. This is why I started Heroes Have Wings. And I'm like you, honestly. I love to hear people's stories, what they do, what made them want to do it. And the reason I do that is because I'm realizing now that not everybody wants to be a CEO of a company. Not everybody wants to be rich and famous, right? A lot of people take a lot of pride in the things they do. And I want the public to know that that is okay. If you love what you do every day, you are living the best life that you possibly can be living.
I concur 100%. And I know for a fact that I will always be, I'll always be an end item user. You give me an airplane, I'll fly it. You give me a helicopter, I'll fly it. I'm good right there. I don't need to own the company that makes them. I don't need to do any of those things. I like money just as much as the next person, but I don't want to go sit in some cubicle someplace and be freaking miserable just because I'm making $1 million or whatever. That sucks. Where's the adventure in that? Where's the satisfaction in that? I mean, for some people there is. Not for this guy. Not for you either.
When you smell that, yeah, is no shame. And I tell a lot of guys, and I think that's one of the biggest messages I'm trying to put out there to the younger generation, that if you want to turn wrenches, do it. You want to fly helicopters and smell that JP8 burning and, live adrenaline full life. Hey, do that. It's not for everybody. I'm here to tell you, it's not for everybody, but love what you do. That's it. If you're an electrician, plumber, framer, whatever it is, love what you do. Take a lot of pride in. One question about the Incheon, was that a more of a training rotation, a deployment? And I'm asking because I really don't know.
And so the skipper of the boat gets on the intercom there, and he's like, hey, there's a lot of crap going on in Albania right now. There's a ton of Kosovar refugees fleeing into Albania. And so we're going to go do humanitarian relief efforts in Albania. So we're going to go park off the coast of there, and we're going to see what we can do to help. And so we just moved food and blankets and supplies all over Albania. So we'd stage out of the airport there. We'd leave the boat in the morning. And then we would go to, what the hell's the name of that place? Tirana, Albania, which is the capital. We go to the airport there. There were some Army dudes there, some Air Force dudes there. It was very joint in nature. And they'd be like, there's just like a guy that you'd go to this tent and be like, hey man, what are you bringing to the table today? He's like, oh, we got 3 H-53s. He's like, oh, you're going to be my dogs. He goes, see all that shit over there? Go pack it up and go move it to point A, point B, point C. Come on back. I'll see what I got for you. And that's what we did for the majority of the time. So we'd do that for about a month. Then we'd freaking leave. We'd go to Brindisi, Italy for a couple of days, grab a couple beers, shoot the shit with some locals, eat some pizzas, get back on the boat, go back out off the coast of Albania and do it again. And it was like a wash, rinse, and repeat for about 4 months. And then we started coming home. And that's kind of how that worked. I actually left the ship early because my father-in-law got ill, and all we were doing was transiting anyway. So Francine she banged out a Red Cross message and was like, man, I could use you here. Our son's been born and my dad's sick. I really like you home. And the chain of command completely supported it. So we pulled into Palma de Mallorca, Spain. Big party town as well. I didn't get to experience any of it, but I was told everybody had a great time there. I went straight to the airport and flew home.
Now,
yep.
Did the Navy, did they take you to the airport, or you had to figure out a way to get to the airport on your own?
Oh no, dude, it was a whole emergency leave situation after the Red Cross message was made. And all the arrangements were made for me, like by our travel, like our clerks or whatever the hell. So it was just like, hey man, go get off the boat at this time. And the little bridge that goes that you can walk up and down to get off the boat, it's called a brow. Like, hey man, go to the end of the brow. Somebody's gonna meet you there. And dude, somebody met me there, took me to the airport. I had a plane ticket in hand. Off I went to meet my son, and check in on my father-in-law. And he was all right. He had a heart attack, and he was on the mend. But that was the first time I met my son Jackson. Was in the Corpus Christi airport, flying home on emergency leave. I'll never forget it.
How was that feeling? You cried?
Knock it off, man. Hell yeah, of course I did. Of course I did. He was a little peanut at the time, man. Now he's a full-grown ass man.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very emotional thing, especially for my 5-year-old that I had a few years ago. I helped deliver her. I was a part of the birth plan. I told the doctors like, "Hey, I want to help deliver my baby." So we're in the delivery room. They're like, "All right, Jason, your turn." I'm like, "All right, gloves." They put the gloves on me, and I'm out there helping deliver my baby. And I had like a come to Jesus life moment at that time. And this is after being out of the army, being retired. I got to see life from the birth, life being birthed here, and I see my beautiful daughter, and it made me realize once again how precious life was, because all the life I seen, all the people I've seen lose their lives in combat in their last moments, and now I'm here delivering my baby, and I get to see her for the first time. I didn't cry. I almost did, but I held it back. But just to see life, that full evolution of life in that full circle, I mean, it's something. It was a beautiful moment, man. It's very, very beautiful, man.
I agree. And that's kind of, I was obviously I was super concerned about what was going on with my father-in-law, and that was the sole purpose for being home. But Francine, dude, that's a lot on a girl's plate. You know what I mean? And Francine's parents lived in Corpus Christi as well, so they were very tight knit at that point. Like everybody was very much a part of each other's daily lives. So for this to happen to her, it was pretty significant. And the chain of command supported it. Like, yeah, bro, like you get that. We've done everything. All we're doing is taking the boat home. You're not going to miss anything. I don't want to say that anyone ever getting sick. It comes at a good time, but the timing worked out very well to make it very, very easy for the chain of command to support. Like, I was just logistically in the right place at the right time to just get the hell off the boat and go home. So it worked out very, very well. And like, obviously the fringe benefit of it was meeting Jackson for the first time. I mean, that was going to come anyway, but I mean, I'm not going to lie. Once, I'm at the airport and I'm talking to Francine, she's like, "Dad's good." But it very quickly shift gears to, holy shit, I'm just going home to meet my boy for the first time, now that I know that my father-in-law is okay.
Huge shout out to your wife, Francine, holding it down, man. She's been holding you down for 27 years. All the good stories, it's great to find a partner like that, but man, 27 years of memories, man. That's very powerful there. What happened next in your naval career?
Okay, so then I was up for orders. I was due to PCS. So one of my best friends, whose name is Sean Sullivan, very affectionately known as Sully, he had orders down to a helicopter training squadron at Naval Air Station Whiting Field, which is in Milton, Florida, right outside of Pensacola. And so we were thick as thieves back in the day in HM15. I mean, thick as thieves. And so he gets orders down there, and he's like, "Dude, you need to come down here. It's a freaking joke. We don't do shit. Like, it's a party. You go to school if you want. We don't work hardly at all. We don't have to fly if we don't want to. Like, it's a joke. It's so chill compared to what we did. It's a great break." And, his wife, Amy, and Francine were great friends as well. And he's like, "Dude, there's in our base housing, there's freaking open houses everywhere. We could freaking be neighbors, dude." And I'm like, "I'm in." So I talked to Francine about it. I was offered a couple of other places to go. Talked to Francine about it. I was like, hey, man, we could go roll with the Sullivans again, just like we have been here. And she's like, let's get the hell out of here. So that's what we did. And the training squadron, it was called Helicopter Training Squadron 8. Nicknamed the 8 Ballers. Great squadron. They were basically like the initial entry rotary wing Navy version. That's basically what they did. And
that's flight school.
Yep, it was flight school for Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard pilots. And then we also had some Saudis there. Saudis got trained to fly helicopters there as well, and a couple other foreign contingents. It was chill. It was great. The flying was really boring. You basically were sitting in the back. You remember the instrument phase where you would be in the front under a hood, and the dude in the back would be the lookout. So that was a lot. We would do a lot of that. Bro, so boring. And then we also taught them like external load operations. I always got a kick out of that, because here you are in this little Bell 206 helicopter, and they're literally picking up a coffee can full of concrete. I mean, it just cracked me up. But we had some pretty significant ground jobs there. So I worked in the student control office, and I was in charge of coordinating winging ceremonies, which happened like every other week. And part of that job was when the students would submit their preference sheets for what aircraft they wanted to fly in the fleet, I compiled that information, and then I would talk to the Navy and the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard's versions of HRC, and I would get that information first. I was a very, very popular guy, man. And it felt good, man. Like it felt good to be dealing with these HRC people and watching these people get put in these positions to go fly these aircraft in all these different spots all over the world. And you're like, man, I know first. And I'm part of the process. I really, really enjoyed it. But the biggest thing, okay, so this is where the next level shit comes in, right? I was like, I know what I want to do, I just don't know how. And I kind of shelved it when I got there, because we were kicking it with our friends, the Sullivans, having a great time, partying and just hanging out and just having a great time. But those aircraft were authorized for single pilot flight. So when an aircraft came out of maintenance, it would get turned over to this little shack down in the freaking hangar, little office. And we had a duty functional check flight pilot who would go down, and he would do functional check flights on these post-maintenance aircraft, right? And so we would go with them. And I'm like, now not only do I know that I can do this, or I think I can do it, I know I can do it. Those guys and girls doing those functional check flights taught me how to fly a helicopter, hands down. So it'd be like, hey man, we need to go out and do a compass swing, which, that's nothing. You freaking put the aircraft on a couple of different headings, write some junk on a card. It takes no time. Bro, we'd go out and bang out an entire tank of gas. So you get the compass swing done, and then we go out and just freaking train, right? So they taught me how to fly. And I was like, that's it. And by now, clearly, I knew that recruiter so many years ago was not lying to me. You can join the Army and become a warrant officer. And some dudes flew a Black Hawk up to our place from Fort Rucker at the time. It was a W4 and a lieutenant colonel. And they just came to talk with our guys and just, do a little cross talking, see, hey, how do you do things? This is how we do things kind of deal. And I started talking to that warrant officer more and more. And he's like, hey man, you want to come check out the rig? And I'm like, yep. So I went down and looked at the Black Hawk, and we had a couple of Coast Guard dudes that were instructors at the squadron that were prior Army warrants as well. And so then I really started picking their brain hard. And I'm like, I'm freaking doing this shit, man. I'm doing this. I know I can do it. I know I can do this. So I put my paperwork in, got turned down the first time, was a little miffed. I'm like, fuck you, Army. If you don't need me, I don't need you neither, man. I was pretty mad. But then the second time around, the very second round, I got picked up, and that was about 5 days before 9/11 is when I got picked up for to do an inter-service transfer into the Army.
Two things I want to say. First one is I was in the Army and I got looked over my first time too. So second time was very common for a lot of us guys.
Yeah, I feel like they just do that to test your mettle,
Yeah.
probably. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we're gonna. I mean, how typical Army is that? Right?
Right.
That's the most typical Army crap ever. We're gonna poke at you a little bit and see if you're worth a damn. All right, bro, you can come be in our club. We were just kidding. We were just
And
kidding.
it's crazy because the way I tell people the story, I was supposed to go to the board in November 2003. I'm in Iraq. This is my first deployment. So back then we didn't have the technologies we have. So you're not updating shit in Iraq. You're in the middle of nowhere with you don't have no internet, none of that stuff. So they had internet shops. I went and checked the list. I didn't make it. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna get out the Army. If I live through this deployment, I'm getting out the Army, calling it a day. And you know how it is. Like you said, the Army just wants to play around with you. I did absolutely nothing to my packet. Nothing. No updates, nothing. And back then they just automatically submitted it. If you got qualified but non-select, they will just bump you to the next board. And that's what happened. January, I just had some free time. I'll never forget this day. I had some free time. I was in Mosul, Iraq. And I didn't have to work during the day because nighttime I was either doing guard towers or I would have to go get ready to go do convoys, whatever. So this time I was doing watchtower duty on the fob where we had a big installation. So I said, let me go look at this list. It came out. Let me see if I made it. And I'll never forget. I pulled the list up and there my name was qualified selected. I said, holy shit. I'm going to be a Black Hawk pilot. It was one of the happiest days in the Army that I'll ever remember. And it's crazy because I went back to go tell my NCOIC. I was like, hey, Sergeant. I'm not going to say his name. Hey, Sergeant, blah, blah. I made it. I'm going to be a warrant officer. No, he was not happy at all. Just started hating. Santiago, you ain't going nowhere. You ain't going to be no pilot. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, shit. Literally about a month later, I was gone. I was out of Iraq on a C-130, leaving Mosul back to the States, man. My other question was, why didn't you consider flying for the Navy?
I did. In fact, when I was, and this is just pure stupidity on my part, that back when I was in Maine, the Navy had a program called the Naval Aviation Cadet Program. And basically, if you go off, you get your associates, you could apply to this Naval Aviation Cadet Program, go to OCS, become a pilot. There were some stipulations down the road that like, hey, you can come in with an associate's, but you got to get your bachelor's by this time. And then you got to just enter the normal career track as a naval aviator. Well, whatever. I was like, I never considered college because I hate school. I just hated it. I'm like, why do I got to go learn about trigonometry? What the hell does that have to do with anything? First of all, why are there letters in math? That don't make no sense to me. What is this nonsense, right? That's just where my brain was at back then. But I was like, oh, so wait, you're telling me if I go to school, if I go to college, you let me fly one of these freaking planes. I was like, I'm in. So I started getting all my crap ready to go to the little community college on the base in Maine, and they suspended the NAVCAD program. And I was like, not doing it. And then I was like, well, I'm going to just go to college while I'm down here in Florida. And then, maybe I'll just, be a Navy pilot. But the warrants visiting happened first. And me talking with the Coast Guard guys that were prior Army warrants at my unit happened first. And I don't want to say that I think it was easier or a path of least resistance as far as how to get into the front seat of a flying machine, but it just interested me. I'm like, and this was all pure peacetime crap at this point, right? But I was like, Blackhawks are pretty cool. I thought Chinooks were way cooler, because being a 53 dude, I was like, well, I wouldn't fly the biggest hunk of metal you got, so I'll probably be a Chinook guy. which clearly did not happen, and that's okay. But that's kind of why. Yeah, like I said, I knew that I was going to take it to some kind of next level. I really wasn't sure what, so I wasn't dead set on staying in the Navy. Um, I just knew I wanted to be a pilot. That was always the goal, right? And when that situation presented itself to me, I'm like, I think I'm just gonna roll with this, man. Hey, let's see how this works. And then I was like, well, if the Army says no, all right, then we'll just go to college and we'll go that route. But this just the way that it happened.
When you met these Army aviators, the W-4, the light colonel, what was your impression of them?
They're different, and not in a bad way. I had grown up in my military career. I had been in for a while, like 10 years at this point, almost 10 years.
What was your rank?
Still an E5. And I had grown up around Army pilots, or Navy pilots, naval flight officers, are the dudes that run the radar and stuff. Like, I was clearly very ingrained in the Navy, and rightfully so. So I thought that they were different. I was like, but just talking to them, I was like, well, of course you're different. You're not in the Navy. And so, the funniest thing, and I can't say this was a selling point for me, but it definitely got my attention, is the W-4 that I was with. They were getting ready to leave, and I was out there talking to him, and they had one-piece flight suits on at the time. And he's like, points to his rank. He's like, this is your brain. And then he points over to the lieutenant colonel's rank. He goes, and that is your brain on drugs. And I'm like, that's savage. I'm like, I would never in a million years consider clowning 05 to his, to his face like that. And I was like, I can't believe this dude just got away. And the lieutenant colonel, he just laughs, gets in, puts his helmet on, and they fly back to Europe. But I was like, if I would have done that to a freaking 05 in the Navy, bruh, I would have been in trouble. So I thought that was interesting. Like, again, not a selling point, but I was like, if you can josh around with an 05 like that, the relationship that these warrant officers have with these commissioned officers must be very, very special. And it's very different than anything I would ever experience in the Navy. That was my main takeaway from it. Not that it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you got away with it. Like, it was more deeply rooted than that. Like, there's a relationship there that affords that kind of banter between these warrant officers and these commissioned officers. And it definitely intrigued me.
You get selected for Army Aviation as a Navy guy. Then 9/11 happens. What were you doing during 9/11?
I was at a Blue Angels practice show on Naval Air Station, Pensacola, with Jackson, who was literally in a stroller at a time and had no business being around loud jets. But I'm like, I'm going to pound it in this kid's brain early and often. But no, I had time off. I was waiting to go to Fort Rucker to start warrant officer candidate school. And they're like, dude, just this is your report date. I was basically on terminal leave in the Navy is probably the best way to explain it. So, I'm like, well, shit, it's a Wednesday or Tuesday or whatever day it was. Like, that's a normal day that the Blue Angels practice. I said, I'm going to go down to Pensacola and watch the Blues fly. And so they took off. They did one circle and they landed. And then, this was before the days of cell phones and stuff. But, you know how it was. It's like for everybody. Someone flew a plane into the Trade Center. Everybody's thinking Cessna. Oh, my gosh, what the heck, whatever. And then all the Blues landed with no show. And they're like, hey, the show is canceled. Something's going on. And I'm like, okay. So one of my old Navy buddies, who was a Navy warrant, was the officer in charge of the search and rescue swimmer school on board NAS Pensacola. So I'm like, I'm going to go over to his office and see what's up. His name's Steve Weigel, great guy. So I roll and he's like, hey, man, what's up? And I was like, hey, what's going on? He's like, dude, you need to come check this out. So I go into his office and I was like, holy crap. And then by then, Pentagon and Shanksville had happened. And he's like, dude, I just got a call. Like, I think they're about to close the doors on this place. He goes, you might want to beat feet out of here. And I'm like, okay. So I packed Jackson up in the car. We left there. We went to Francine's work for a little bit. She was a veterinary technician for a vet in town. Hung out there and we're watching this drama unfold on this little black and white TV / transistor radio combo with the antenna sticking up out of it in the vet's office. And I was like, oh shit. maybe I should have stayed in the Navy. I that was my first thoughts. And then of course I was like, well, what does this mean for me? You know, like I'm in this weird state of limbo. Someone's just attacked our country. Nobody knows. Like, what do I do? So I called my recruiter. I'm like, what do I do? He's like, nothing. Just stay put. Like, just, yes, something terrible is going on, but you're in a pipeline. It's not like we're just going to give you the keys to some helicopter so you can go kill bad guys. There's a process, bro. Just stick with the process. So that's where I was at. And then I went home and just, you know, since I had so much time off, I just could not stop watching the everything unfold on the news. And probably I watched it too much because Francine's birthday is September 17th, and I was so engrossed with what was going on. Forgot her birthday. Bad. Was kind of messed up, but that's what I did. I just sat there and watched it on TV, and I was like, oh, I wonder. I wasn't scared, but I was like, I wonder what is going to happen. What is this going to mean for me? What is this going to mean for my family? I'm clearly going to go somewhere and do something.
9/11 just happens. You leave Pensacola, go to Fort Rucker, Alabama. What was that like? And what was the culture shock like?
I remember getting there and okay, you're in the Army now, right? I mean, literally, you're in the Army now. And I was like, what the fuck? That's literally, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is nothing like what I expected it to be. You know, having just left the Navy, well, I expected OC, you know, Warrant Officer Candidate School. I didn't expect to be treated like a keying up and that. I mean, it's Warrant Officer Candidate School, man. Like, so that was okay. I mean, as far as expectations are concerned, that was pretty much what I expected, you know, because, you know, when you ask people what walk school's like, man, you go there, you do some PT, you got to write some memos and crap, you go to some classes, blah, blah, blah. That was pretty much as advertised. But I was not used, clearly, to anything in the Army. In fact, I asked to go to Army basic training. I asked them, I was like, dude, I am a squid, full-blooded squid. I think it would probably be in my best interest to go to Fort Jackson or wherever and do some Army shit first. And they're like, no, you know, I think the only inter-service transfers that had to go to Army basic were the Air Force. They're like, it's not required, and we don't care if you request it. You're not doing it. Probably a blessing in disguise now that I think about it. Like, what's the point, right? So it was a very surreal, weird experience. I mean, I clearly brought it upon myself. It's something that I wanted to do, but as far as I think the shock for anybody going to Warrant Officer Candidate School would be roughly the same. And I guess I'm not entirely sure. So I was just like, okay, whatever. This is just the way that it is, you know. And again, dude, you're there to be indoctrinated into a certain way. And for me, it was kind of a, you know, twofold, because not only are they teaching you how to be a warrant officer, they're also teaching you how to be in the Army, which, as you know, Warrant Officer Candidate School is not geared to teach a person how to be in the Army. So all the Army ways, like, I didn't know anything about that, but there was none of that going on at Warrant Officer Candidate School anyway, you know. And it's funny now thinking back upon it, and having just watched Dwayne's podcast not too long ago, where, you know, dude, first of all, Dwayne Taylor is a freaking badass. He's a badass. You know, I got to chase him all around southern Afghanistan and sit in tents with him and all these different fobs and cut up and have a good time and have his back and his crew's back. And, you know, we went to the tactical operations course together. Not to digress too much, but my main takeaway from what he said and what was significant to me were completely opposite ends of the spectrum. So Dwayne, PT was a joke. The PT was not a joke to me, dude. Not a joke to me. Here I was, this super skinny ass squid. I think I got like maybe a 185, 190 on my PT test just to get in. I was garbage, dude, absolute garbage. So the PT was a big deal to me. I don't know how your walk school class was, but ours was very special forces heavy. And they just thought that shit was such a joke. And so I'm just surrounded by all these huge SF dudes. I mean, just bruisers of human beings. And they're like, what? 100 more push-ups, whatever. I'm like, 100 more? I can barely do 50 any something bitches. I'm gonna die. So that was the most thing. I was like, dude, you gotta get with it. So I was super sore all the time. Uh, got whipped into shape pretty quick, obviously. We did a lot of running, a lot of push-ups, a lot of that nonsense going on. So it was swift and severe for me, the increase in my my physical fitness level there. Well, Francine's dad got sick again when I was in walk school, so that was a pretty big deal. He had brain tumor, and so I can't remember exactly how it went down, but one of the cadre told me like, "Hey, you need to call home." So I called home, and she told me what was going on. I was like, "Okay." And then I called my father-in-law, and this was so he had to have brain surgery, a tumor removed from his brain. And I talked to him, and he's like, "Hey, man," he goes, "I'm gonna be all right. Like, I'll be at your graduation. Don't worry about me." He's like, "You just need to focus on your shit. I'll be there." And I was like, "Fuck you, you're killing me." Okay, okay. So they, even in the process of, like beating your ass, down to nothing, at least that was how I felt about it. I was just like, oh my God, these guys are beating me down. The cadre was very, very supportive of my family situation. We had some very strict phone privileges in law school, right? I didn't have any, I had no restrictions. I could go pick up that phone whenever I wanted, and I could call home to check on my family. I was super appreciative of that. Yeah, and he made to my graduation.
How was it building those relationships? You being a brand new Army guy, just left the Navy. That little, you know how we, pick on each other, right? Navy to Army all day.
I'm trying to think of a nice way to explain this because, as you know, the Army, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I had a feeling you were going down the road of the Army feels some type of way about squids and their behaviors, if you will, on the boat, or what do you got, like, I think the easiest and most politically correct joke to say is, "Oh, you go out to the sea with 5,000 dudes and 2,500 couples come back," like, so that was very prevalent when I was in walk school. Especially the SF dudes. I mean, they ragged me. And so, but in a good way. I mean, it was very good natured ribbing. There was a couple of other Navy dudes. We had an Air Force guy as well in our class, a Marine. I just took it in stride because those people, while they were also busting my chops in a very good natured way, were also be like, when there was things, nothing in particular sticks out in my mind about something I didn't understand about the way Big Green Army works, stuff that is super commonplace to anybody that's been in the Army for even the shortest periods of time. They'd be like, okay, we do this because of this. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks, man. And then a lot of the guys were just curious. Like, they know that 5,000 dudes don't go out on a boat and then 2,500 couples come back. They know that's crap, but they just like you. Hey, what is it really like being on the boat for years at a time? Okay, first of all, you're not on the boat for years at a time. This is how the deployments work. This is how this works for a ship guy. This is how it works for a naval aviation guy. This is how it works for a subsurface guy. This is how it works for a CD, our construction battalion, Navy people. So that everybody learned a lot, but the ribbing was prevalent and at the forefront of all of this stuff. And I really had a good time with it, man. It made me laugh a lot, and I made them laugh a lot. I mean, I'm still a class clown, man. Just because I'm in a new place and I'm learning all these new things, and it is somewhat shocking to me, I'm still me. So I just made light of it, and some people learned some shit along the way, and as did I. Clearly the learning curve was very, very steep, especially after that was over and we got to flight.
What time of the year
Very,
did
very
you go to
steep.
flight school? What month?
Oh my God, dude. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't even remember, but I know it took over 2 years because of all of the bubbles that we called them, the waiting in between the different phases of training. But I got done in 2004. So I want to say it was probably like the springtime when we actually started going through the classes and then going out to the flight line. So that would be the spring of 2002, something like that.
Okay. I have a question. It's a
So
little off topic, but I've been wanting to know this my entire life, and since I have a Navy guy in front of me, I need to ask. When the aircraft carrier is back at home, do the sailors actually live on the ship or do they live somewhere else?
Some do and some don't. And the Navy has been taking great strides in making sure that those, especially single sailors, get the hell off that ship when the ship is in port. So they have barracks for them for single sailors that are attached to a ship. So basically, what they'll do when their ship is in port is, they'll go live in the barracks, just like an enlisted Army guy lives in the barracks, or an officer lives in the BOQ, right? And then when it's time to go to work, they just drive their car to these massive parking lots that are next to these ships, and they get on the ship and they do their job.
How was flight school for you? Was it hard, easy? You're finally in the front seat of a helicopter. Your dream is being fulfilled. How was all that? Was it overwhelming? Was it like, damn, I'm here, I made it? Explain that to me.
I don't remember it being overwhelming. The flying part and the learning about rotary wing aerodynamics and aeromedical things and, all that was not overwhelming to me. I freaking sucked that shit up. I loved it. The real challenge was being in the Army. And to be perfectly honest with you, and as we continue down this freaking road of the places that you went to, I went to, either separately or together, and even up to the day I retired, I just felt like I was TDY to the Army, and that at some point I was going to go back to the Navy. It was a true identity crisis. And I thought as time went on, it would go away, and it just never went away. And it wasn't, I don't feel like it was too much. It was kind of to my detriment at some points in my career as an Army aviator. But that was my biggest challenge, starting from the day we got over to flight school company until the day I retire. I can't stress that enough. And it was tough sometimes. But the other stuff, dude, ate it up, man. And I felt like I had a head start. Those nice guys and gals at my last squadron had taught me how to fly a Bell 206, and it showed. And I loved it. I did very well. I felt like I did very, very well. Still managed to fail a check ride in primary, which was super embarrassing. And it was over some technicalities that really aren't worth getting into. But that kind of knocked the wind out of my sails for a little bit. I was like, man, I thought I had this shit wired and I just failed this check ride. Shit, maybe this is not for me. So there was a lot of self-doubt. And unfortunately, primacy being what it is, I'd never failed a check ride in my life. And even now, when I take check rides at the airline I'm at, I still think about that day. I'm like, oh God, am I going to screw this up? So that's kind of tough. So no, it was just mainly trying to figure out how to be a squid and live in the Army's world. And honestly, I had probably taken a little bit different, mental, thought about it differently. And said, hey, instead of being a squid, trying to live in the Army world, why don't you be in the Army and quit being a squid? And again, primacy, it was kind of tough. So I spent the majority of my time just trying to correlate, okay, this is what I know. So can I find the similarities in the way squids do shit and the way Joes do shit and kind of find some common ground there? And dude, it just did not work out well, man. But I really enjoyed flight school. I really enjoyed it.
After flight school, you knocked that out. Where do you go next?
The mighty nomads of the multinational force and observers, Sinai, Egypt, flying the venerable, trusted, and true UH-1 Huey. I had to get out my thesaurus for that one, man.
So when you left flight school, were you rated as a 60 guy?
I was not. So that was one of my first instances where I was like, man, these people don't give a shit about us, dog.
At least you learned that early. That's a good thing. You learned that early.
Yeah. So, just as well as anybody else that's gone through that course, grades are everything. The order of merit list is everything. If you want to get something, you want to achieve a specific airframe and a specific place to go fly it, you better put in the work, son. And I did. I put that shit in. And due to my measurements, being a tall, lanky ass dude, I did not fit in OH-58 Alpha Charlies, is what we back then did the basic combat skills portion of flight training in. And just to briefly touch on that, because I don't think anybody else on the pod has done it yet. That's where you learn to be an Army pilot, right? You learn how to, the terrain association, flying with ground guy maps, doing routes, flying NVGs. And I did not fit in an OH-58 Alpha Charlie, which is what was the primary aircraft I've used for the basic combat skills portion of training. So I did it in the Huey. And I was glad, because what a legendary piece of machinery, dude. And I mean, I could talk about that for way longer than we have time for, but dude, anybody that loves helicopters, oh, God loves me my Huey. That's freaking such a great rig. So I was super happy. I was like, oh, this is great. And I'm going to get to fly the Huey, at least here. And then I'll go, I still wanted to be a Chinook pilot, because I still had that 53 ingrained in me. I was like, I want a big iron, man. I want to fly big shit. So it comes time to select. Big day for any W1 going through flight school. It's the biggest day of flight school, right? And so we go in there, and there was another guy, prior tanker dude, and we were just battling back and forth for some of them top spots, right? And so we knew that, and he wanted to be a hawk guy. I wanted to be a Chinook guy, and we were in cahoots. He's like, hey man, I'm not going to touch your shit. You're not going to touch my shit. We should be fine if what we both want is up there. And I'm like, all right, man, we're cool. Yeah, I bet. So we go in there, and the chief of the school, you remember him, not a fan, but he comes in, and he's like, hey, all right. And he writes all the shit on the board, and I'm like, oh, sweet. There's some Chinooks up there. There's some Hawks up there. I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. This is going to work out. And he's like, hey, where are the two dudes in here that flew Hueys for basic combat skills? Okay, you two are going to Egypt to fly Hueys. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's pick. And I was like, what just happened?
What?
Yeah, that's how it went down. And I knew about the MFO. Yeah, I known about the MFO. And just like every other married W1 going through flight school, I sat down with Francine. I wrote out everything on this piece of paper, all the aircraft, all the duty stations, everything. And literally as an afterthought, after going through this with her for a couple hours, I was like, oh yeah, they got this shit in Egypt. They got Hueys, but like it's a non-event. I'm not even, it won't happen. So that was a long drive home. Even though I lived on post, I was like, this is the longest drive home ever. I can't believe I've got to tell her this shit. And I was like, yo, I'm going to freaking Egypt. And I had to tell her. And I was like, I was mad because why did I put in all that work? Why did I put in all this hard-ass work if this was just going to happen? Now, I can't say that if they would have told me at the beginning of basic combat skills, like, hey, since you're kind of a Huey guy now, we're going to send you to Egypt after flight school's over. I can't say that would have changed my study habits, my work ethic, any of those things at all. So I guess it kind of didn't matter, but I was still pretty hot, man. I was like, damn, this sucks, dude. So I went home. I told Francine. She was upset. I was upset. But, I got to thinking about it. I was like, well, I've never been to Egypt before. I still get to keep flying a Huey. And you can't be, Matt, so naive to think that you can just do whatever you want in the Army. These guys put you through flight school. You literally are a rated helicopter pilot right now. And they are telling you, hey, bro, you're going to go to Egypt and you're going to fly a Huey. Why bucket? What's the point? What's the point? So off to Egypt I went. There's a W1.
So you show up to MFO. By the way, that was my first duty assignment as well from flight school, but I went there for the Blackhawks are showing up. So I was one of the first 60 guys to fly Blackhawks in Egypt. You show up to MFO, North Camp or South Camp?
I was primarily at North Camp. I didn't want to go to South Camp. I don't know why, which is dumb, until I went. And then I was like, what is this little magic slice of heaven y'all got going on down here? Oh yeah, I stayed up at North Camp almost all the time. And then I'd go down and do like some sling load crap, or if a guy would go on leave down at South Camp, I'd roll down there until he got back off of his mid-tour leave. But I was primarily a North Camper.
I remember feeling the same way when I found out. I was probably a month into being at the MFO, and I was in North Camp, and then they're like, Santiago, you're going to South Camp. And I was mad about it, but ultimately it was a blessing. I think the biggest thing I was mad about, they wanted me to do dunker training all over again. I literally just did dunker 2 weeks before I got the sign. I show up, and they're like, you got to do it again. I'm like, bro, I got my card. I just did it. What's the purpose of this? How long were you in MFO for?
1 year.
How was it?
I loved it. I absolutely loved that place. I remember showing up to Bragg, and I was with like a bunch of W3s and W4s, and it's me and another W1, and these guys are like, what in the hell are you two dudes doing here? Well, they sent us here, man. And this guy, he goes, I've been trying to get orders here forever, and you just get involuntarily sent here out of flight school? He goes, you have no idea what you're in for. And I thought he meant like it was going to be tough. It was not tough, dude. It was a riot. It was an absolute riot. A lot of, I mean, as you know, there are 14 different countries that comprise the multinational force of observers. And up at North Camp, each one of those countries had their own bar. And I was a pretty popular guy, I think is the best way to explain it. When it was time to stop partying, I would always mind my P's and Q's as far as that's concerned, but I'm a very social dude, and you're surrounded by people from literally all over the world: Colombians, Fijians, Canadians, Kiwis, Aussies, Uruguayans, and them guys can party, Hungarians, French, and I just ate it up. I mean, at your disposal are literally 13 different nationalities, cultures, different languages, different customs, courtesies, traditions. I was fascinated by the whole scene. And I think that's what I liked North Camp so much, is because of that.
It was a good experience. What was your biggest takeaway from the MFO? It being your first duty station, and you're one of the last few Huey guys to be there.
Correct. My biggest takeaway from it, achievement-wise, was making day, night, and night vision goggle pilot in command as a W1. Yeah. I knew I could do it. I was, well, we don't normally do this. But I had a great standardization pilot, a couple other instructor pilots, and I put in the work. I put in the work at the bar. I put in the work at the airfield, not necessarily concurrently, but you know what I'm saying? I worked very hard, and I played very hard, and it paid off. Clearly not the same as Big Army. The mission set's very easy, very predictable. And so I think that because the mission was easy, that afforded me the opportunity to do that as a W1. Whereas had I gone like straight to the 101st, that wouldn't have happened. That wouldn't have happened. So that was my biggest takeaway from that. My other biggest takeaway, not achievement based, was that there was a war going on, and we were, for the longest time I was there, other than shooting the shit about it on occasion, oblivious until people started dying. Friends of friends. It was back when it was Huey's. That CAV influence was very heavy. There were a lot of OH-58 guys there, just chilling out for a year. And I remember I actually built, me and a couple other warrants built a bar behind the warrant officer barracks. It's called the 5 and 9. Great spot. And I remember sitting in there, and one of my buddies was in there, and he was forlorn. And he's like, one of my buddies just got killed in Iraq. And I was like, damn, dude. And then it happened again. And the two particular individuals, and I will never forget their names, is because this is the first time I realized that we're in the business of war, bro. Even though Egypt is the exact opposite of that. Those two people's names were Aaron Weaver and Kimberly Hampton, and they were friends of guys that were at the MFO there. And they were obviously very upset. A lot of them were like, they just wanted to go to Iraq immediately. I also felt the same way. I'm like, man, we're just over here freaking having pizza night, drinking beer, just not really doing anything of worth. At least that's the way that it felt to us. And here, now I have friends of my friends are over there getting killed. And I was like, it was a little disheartening because I'm like, I kind of feel like I shouldn't be here. Like there's a greater cause to the reason behind me being an Army aviator and flying these dudes around looking at old tanks and crap in the middle of the desert that hasn't moved in decades. This doesn't really seem like this is a thing, or the best place for me to be. And we all felt that way. So that was a huge takeaway, is that, yeah, we're having a good time. There's some serious crap going on in Army aviation in other parts of the world, and we are not part of that right now.
So you wrap it up at the MFO. Where do you head to next?
I went down to Fort Rucker, and I went to the UH-60 aircraft qualification course. And after I completed that, I went to Alpha Company 6 of the 101st, the Mighty Warlords, and I stayed there until I retired.
So you show up to Fort Campbell, 101st, get to the Warlords. Let's talk about it. How was it? You leaving the MFO, now you're at the 101st, two completely different units. How was that?
As you know, the MFO is not the real Army, dude. It's a completely, totally separate deal. So now I was like, all right, I'm in the real Army now. I am in the real Army. I showed up. They had already done one Iraq deployment, and we were going on another one. So I quickly did my readiness level progression. I promoted the W-2 while I was in Egypt too, so I showed up there as a W-2.
Real quick, Matt, W-2 that never flew in a Black Hawk, right?
Ever. Nope, never. Except for the qualification course.
Did that matter when you showed up?
No, I don't think that it did. I mean, I was really no different than someone that was coming out of flight school, except I had some pilot and command experience. But as far as the machine itself, I mean, obviously, way more complex machine than a Huey. But again, I just nerded out, sucked it all in, learned as much as I could. We had great instructor pilots at the time. Sean Mertens, Wayne Price, Kevin Powell, just to name a couple. And they just ran me through it all, dude. They just were like, hey, bro, this is how I fly Black Hawk. Start sucking it up because we're going to Iraq. Okay, yes, sir. So I progressed pretty quick. And we did, for workup for that particular deployment, just like everybody else, we went out to the Joint Readiness Training Center in Fort Polk, did, our 30 days out there flying around, integrating with ground units, all the normal type stuff that you do on one of those rotations. And I took a pilot and command check ride right before we left for Iraq. So I showed up to Iraq as a PC in a Black Hawk.
Damn.
Which was nice.
You fast tracking, man.
Well, it was important, dude. I mean, and I didn't really think about it at the time. And I don't really feel like I did anything extraordinary, to be perfectly honest with you. But this was something that I just knew that I could do, and I wanted to do it. And I'm like, why not put the effort in? Like, dude, just put in the work. Put in the work. It will pay off. And so I did. And that's just kind of how it all worked out. It's been working out for me ever since I left high school. Why would it not continue to work out? You know what I mean? So
you show up to Iraq, brand new PC, first combat deployment, first Army aviation unit, just first real Army unit, excluding the MFO. How overwhelmed were you?
Very. And the Iraq part was overwhelming in and of itself, but I also had that added, you're in the Army, you're in the real Army now. thing, and just trying to figure out the way the big green army works, and still my squid brain, I had a lot of trouble wrapping my head around stuff that just made absolutely no sense. To where guys who had been so I've been in the military for like 10, 11 years at this point. And then I look over at this other W2, W3 that's been in the Army for 10 years, and stuff that's so commonplace to him or her. I'm like, do you not see how stupid this is? This is the stupidest crap I've ever seen in my life. And they're like, no, it's the Army, dude. Like, this
It's
is just the
Monday,
way
bro.
that yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is what we call Tuesday in the Army, bro. This is normal shit. Hey, man, everybody's a soldier first, dude. So just because you're a freaking pilot, some kind of shit hot pilot or whatever, you're above picking up trash. Shit's probably your trash to begin with, you lazy ass. You better pick that shit up, But no, the Iraq portion of it, it was overwhelming because it was Iraq. It was my very first time being in a combat situation. But the combat part of it, I didn't really feel overly stressed other than that, okay, I'm here. All right, I'm here. There's a good possibility something could happen to you. There's a good possibility something could happen to your friends. I was thinking back to my time in the MFO, and, my OH-58 buddies had lost their friends. And I'm like, okay, this shit's real. Something could go down. And then I started just flying. And, at the time, our primary responsibility was flying around the 3 or 4 different generals that were in charge of the 101st Airborne Division, and also doing ring routes, which are just basically, you're like an airliner. You're just going from base to base, no matter how large or how small, and moving around people, moving around cargo. And I don't want to say it was mundane. Every day was different. But there was a lot of similarities between missions. We also did a lot of command and control missions where, there's some kind of operation going on the ground, and you get in your Black Hawk full of radios and other junk, and you circle high above whatever is going on the ground, whatever operation is taking place, and you just support the ground unit as a airborne communications platform. Did a lot of that, and it got routine. I settled in, just as we all did. When you first get there, you're like, oh, you're super hypersensitive, and I don't know, I felt like I looked like a fool. I remember when we showed up to Kuwait, and we got off the airplane into Kuwait, and we're all getting on these buses, and I'm just looking around at all of us, and how they just plussed us up on all this brand new gear, Wiley X's, brand new uniforms, brand new body armor. And I just looked around at all of us. I was like, we look so dumb because all of our shit is new. Like, we're just everything. It looked like we had just walked out of like a closet full of this stuff. Everything was brand new, which inversely, you definitely don't look like that on the way out, which we were seeing these guys coming out, and I just feel so insignificant and silly with these brand new big bug eye Wiley X's that made me look like Bono from U2. I took them off. I was like, I can't. I felt really out of place. But now you get there, we got into a routine, and then it started getting real for us. A couple of our aircraft were flying into the Baghdad International Airport one night, and they came under a rather complex attack from a couple of different positions going into the airport. And one of our aircraft got a hole in its tail rotor drive shaft. Luckily, nothing happened to them. They spent the night down there. They got a new drive shaft in the rig, tested it, and flew home. But I was like, okay, man, this shit's real. This shit is freaking no joke. And other significant event would be there was an Alaska National Guard aircraft, 2 of them, that were flying from Mosul back out to Tal Afar, and one of them crashed, so they lost a crew and an aircraft. And I got sent up there with a young lieutenant to augment them with one of our aircraft because they had lost, a crew in an aircraft. And just being there around those guys and gals after they had lost a crew and aircraft, they were beat up, dude. I can't remember exactly how long they had been there at the time, but it was uncomfortable. But we integrated very quickly. But those 2 instances really stick out in my mind the most as, you're out flying ring routes and you're out flying C2 missions or flying the general around. But hey, man, there's this other shit and it ain't no joke. So they got sober really, really quickly.
What was your biggest takeaway from your first deployment in Iraq?
I'm going home. Yay. I remember feeling that very specifically going home. Uh, that was my, I mean, I think that's everybody's biggest takeaway, but probably those two experiences were my biggest takeaways from that deployment, that this is real shit, that, 99% of the time you can go out here and you can just fly people and freaking bags and mail and whatever else around. But there's also this very real, very serious shit going on. Was probably my biggest takeaway of that particular deployment. And I made it. I went home.
So you guys got back in 2000. What year you got back? So you got back in 06. I remember that. What month was that?
July or August or something like that. I can't remember specifically.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I was getting to you guys about August 2006, and you guys are just started pouring in, and I started meeting everybody then. And at that time, we knew we were going to Afghanistan, right? How did you feel getting back from Iraq, knowing that in a year from now you're going right back to Afghanistan?
I was all in at that point. You know what I mean? And my family and being with them was obviously very important to me. I think I probably could have negotiated with HRC to go someplace else, perhaps. I don't know. But I remember just not wanting to do it. It seemed to me that staying at where I was at, and I mean, that Francine and Megan and Jackson didn't have to move. And that's kind of something I just kind of carried throughout the rest of my time in the Army. So I was like, okay, this is a new place. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I need to go. I need to go. So that's kind of what I thought. And then again, you start doing your like pre-deployment type stuff. And then we added high altitude crap, training. Definitely was a crap. It's some great training, dude. So I went out to the high altitude, the training school out in Colorado, learned some great stuff out there. And I felt very prepared after all of the things we did. Because, sometimes when you're doing these things in between deployments, it's super, super easy to get focused on, this is just taking away more time from my family. And this is bullshit. We're going to JRTC again. Nobody learns anything there. It's dumb, right? And again, this is my squid brain trying to wrap my something around what is Army. Now, if you look at it from a different perspective, like, hey, your new people are coming into the unit. They need to be trained up. We need to fly. We need to become more cohesive. And these are the reasons that you go to JRTC. If you look at it like that, and I probably should have at the time, I probably wouldn't have been so dang butthurt all the time. I don't want to go stay in this dumb tent. This is ridiculous. Like, what are we doing out here?
I think that you got to think about it too. We're much younger back then. Because even me, I look back and I was like, man, I was so angry in the damn Army. And I look back, I was like, why though? Right? I should have just had a positive outlook on things and just embraced it. I think, like you said, high altitude training was very important. I mean, when we showed up to Afghanistan, I felt comfortable flying in high altitudes and, performance, PPC and all that stuff, tab data,
Yeah.
and we're crunching this stuff with paper. We didn't have the nice mic models and all this other stuff. So it was good to have those reps underneath our belt before we showed up.
And there's also, at least for me, I got a tremendous amount of satisfaction knowing that I could squeeze every last % out of that rig at any altitude. I was like, I love power management in high, hot, and heavy environments. I loved it, and you better. You had better embrace that shit, or you're gonna get yourself killed.
I think that's what made us good aviators, because not only did we practice it, we had to actually live that shit and truly pushing that aircraft to a limitation where, if you're only a few pounds heavy, and if we don't have the real estate to do rolling takeoffs, then now we have a problem, right?
Correct.
But it was some good stuff, man. Very good stuff.
I freaking love that crap, man. It was so much fun.
What was your most memorable moment in that 2008 deployment?
September 9th, 2008. So, um, I mean, to preface the whole thing, our focus had kind of shifted from what we were doing in Iraq. We were still doing general officer support. We were still doing some, logistics type stuff, but the warlords got very, very heavily involved into doing deliberate operations, which are taking a ground force of some sort and putting them on a target someplace, and then getting out and doing whatever business it is that they need to do and picking them back up and bringing them home. So a lot of raids. We did some 2-ship raids. We did 4-ship raids. We did full-on assaults. And it was one right after the other, right after the other, right after the other. And to get a break from this, you could be sent over to chase the medevac. But dude, it's war, we signed up. This is what's being asked of us. You're going to do it. So I was on Med Chase. And at this time, our company commander was Sam Pemberton. Big old Sammy P. Great human being. So he had just shown up not too long ago to this particular date. And a couple of days prior to that, he's like, hey, I think I'm going to roll over and do some Med Chase because, that shit was hairy in RC East, in the eastern part of Afghanistan. We were very, very busy. We were moving a lot of people around, both living and not living. Like it was a busy, it was very active. So he's asking me some questions, about it. And he's like, hey, I think I'm going to roll over and do Med Chase with you tomorrow. I'm like, all right, man, no problem. And I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 days in a row they did this. No calls. And, so I'm just like literally hibernating on some piece of crap bed in that Med Chase room in that old hangar that the Soviets built on Bagram Airfield way back in the day. And I'm just loving it. I'm just freaking sleeping, eating, sleeping some more. It's timing, sir. It's just timing. And he's like,
Medevac is all about timing, man. That's all medevac is.
Yep. So I don't think, we would pull 24-hour shifts Med Chase in Bagram. And I don't think that he stayed for the entire time. He's like, I'm out of here, man. And then whoever was the originally scheduled co-pilot came back over. So then this happens again the next day. And I think it was 2 days. I might be mistaken, but I know it was at least one day. He's like, psh. He didn't blow it off, but he was like, there's nothing happening. I'm going to go. I mean, clearly company commander, I don't understand their role. Well, I do, but I don't know. I'm not part of their day-to-day role. I know he had a lot of junk to do, and it was probably behind a computer. And he's like, I got to go, man. Okay. So he leaves. Oh, and actually right after he left, boom, we go on a call. And he's like, oh. So, and I think it was the next day he came. That was that day. And we get a call to go out to a point of injury in the Tagab, which, as you know, from Bagram is a very, very short flight. And so we make our way out there, and there's a Humvee sitting in the middle of the road on fire, and find a place to land. And he's like, hey, are you comfortable with me doing the landing? I'm like, no. Which is kind of jacked up because Sammy P can wiggle some sticks now, So, but he was totally cool about it. But I remember going in and feeling, even before we landed, you could feel the heat coming off of this fire. And like an idiot, I forgot to turn the countermeasures off. So the heat signature of the fire launched a bunch of flares into the ground. I'm like, moron. So the dust off unit links up with the dudes and they're like, hey, we got a guy. And then there's a hero. Okay. And I'd done a couple hero missions before. So I was, pretty well versed in what that might look like, what was about to happen. But this is the first time that I ever picked up anybody that was not in a body bag. And I just remember looking back at this kid, a very young Marine. His name was Nicholas Madrazo. And I just remember looking at like his boots, like he tied those boots. I remember looking at a big Sunto dive watch on, and I remember looking at his watch, thinking like he put that watch on. It was still had numbers on it. It was a big digital dive watch, and I could see, no, I turned around and I looked and I could see numbers on it. And I was like, how crazy is this, man? This poor young man lost his life, and this watch is still working. You want to talk about the weirdest, most random shit that goes through your head. It's just really stuck in my brain for a long time, brother. So anyway, we took him back to Bagram, and old Sammy P was like, yeah, this mid-chase shit ain't no joke. And I'm like, no, sir, it's not. He's like, okay, I now have done literally everything there is to do as a warlord in the company. I now got a taste of mid-chase. I got a taste of deliberate ops. I got a taste of GO support, general officer support. I got a taste of just running people back and forth to Kabul. I now, as the sixth element, as we call them, of this company, know exactly what all my people are doing when they're out flying around. Or words to that effect. And off he went. So that was a big takeaway. And I thought about that kid for a long time. Too much. And it was really bugging me when I came home, and Francine was like, dude, you need to figure out who this kid is. And I was like, yeah. So we started looking through news articles and crap, and she pulled up this news article, and it was him. And I was able to tell by the watch, and I saw that watch on that kid's wrist, dude, and it was a picture of him alive, obviously. And I saw that watch, and I just fucking lost my shit. And I was like, I got to find out about this kid's family. I want them to know, it was our responsibility to take these men and these women home, and we were the first step home. And it felt super important to me that they know, but I also think I also thought it would be very helpful to me. So through the power of the internet, I found his parents. I called them, and I told them who I was, and I asked them if they would like to know anything about the day that their son died. And they said yes. And I told them, I was like, I left a lot out, but I said, I was there. And my friend Sam was there. And we took him out of there and we got him home. And I just want to let you know, like what that, without, giving too much detail about that, what that was like. And, I never met your son. But for reasons that are unbeknownst to me, your son is very prevalent in my mind a lot. And they said, okay, thank you. They came out to visit us. We lived in Annapolis after I retired, and they came out to visit him at Arlington. And they came over to the house, and I met them. And there was a lot of crying and a lot of this and a lot of that. But dude, it was probably one of the most therapeutic experiences of my life, meeting these people. And I hope it was for them too. So that was one of my biggest takeaways of that deployment, was that day with Sam.
Yeah, I think, man, flying heroes is tough, man. It's
Yeah, it really is.
it's a tough thing. It's a very honorable thing, but it's tough, man. And I thank God that we had the skill and the capabilities to make sure that these soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, that we were the beginning of their journey home, and we could provide them that service and make sure that they could at least get home to their families, because they deserve that. At a minimum, they deserve that.
Yep, you're 100% correct. I changed my perspective on hero missions after that day. Because yes, it was a kind of a weird way to get a break from doing deliberate ops night after night. But instead of thinking about it as, this is just a really crappy way to get a break from all that, change your mindset into how honorable and how important this is. And you are being afforded the opportunity. You are being given that opportunity to do something extraordinary for a person who has given their life on a battlefield. And that completely changed my perspective about med chase. And then it was just all about, I can't wait to go over there. I can't wait to go do med chase. And it's not because I wanted to do hero missions. It was way more than that. It was having a dust off bird's back. One of the best feelings in the world, whether you shot at somebody or not. And you know just as well as I do, what a rewarding job dust off is. It's just a fucking amazing job. And my heroes, just like yours, will forever and always be Army flight medics. Army flight medics. And I have a couple in particular. We might get to that shit later because it's going to tear you up. And I didn't plan this after I saw your podcast the other day. I already felt some type of way about these two individuals, but maybe we'll talk about that later. But yeah, those guys are my heroes, and just being there for them is just the biggest deal in the world to me.
It's hard to explain, man. I can't explain it. I can't. Unless you've done it, I can't explain it. And it's hard. I can't even, I don't know. I can't explain it. It's crazy though.
Well, I think that you can, and I think that you have, and I think that you have a buttload of friends that are getting on this podcast, and where you might feel that you're falling short explaining it, other people are picking it up. So here we are, yet again, taking care of each other, picking up where another guy left off, and getting this done. This podcast will definitely explain to any audience member, if they watch more than one thing, more than one of these podcasts, they will get a true idea of what it is like to do medevac missions and medevac chase, and how awesome it is.
I want to tell a quick story. One of our most memorable moments with you. I was a young W-2. We're in the back 40 of Campbell, and we're flying back. We just did some training stuff during the daytime when we hit this weather cell. I don't know if you remember this, but it started pouring. It came out of nowhere. You know how it is, Tennessee, isolated cell comes out of nowhere. It just started shitting on us. But however, we got told by Fort Campbell range controller, somebody got on the radio and said, hey, blah, 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 there's a weather cell out there. Like, yeah, we don't see it. We're coming back home anyways. And then bam, we hit it. And I'll never forget, because this was potentially my first time ever potentially going inadvertent, because the cell was very isolated. So we hit it, and I'm on the controls. You're doing everything else. I'm flying, and I started lowering my collective. You're like, what are you doing, dumbass? You're like, hey, climb. You don't lower the collective if it starts, the visibility's getting bad. I'm like, all right, roger that. But I learned that was one of my most memorable moments, because I learned that if we do hit weather, we don't try to hug the trees. That's how we smack into them. We start climbing. We start getting ready for whatever's going to happen. Luckily for us, as I started my climb, the cell was really isolated. It's one of them real crazy ones.
Yeah.
Like 2 minutes later, we're out of it and we're clear. But we started our climb, and that was something I would always appreciate from you, because you taught me, and that's something I learned as I became a PC. We hit weather, we don't descend. We commit to weather, we start getting prepped for this weather, for these instruments, because we don't want to be in transition. That's when the shit really gets bad.
Correct.
We get back 2008. I leave. What happens then? Because I don't know what happened, and what happened with, like, we knew you guys are going back to Afghanistan again. First off, how was your mental health feeling after the whole situation with the heroes?
Bad. And it was a combination that at that point of very chronic stress of the deliberates over and over and over again, interspersed with some hero missions over and over and over again. It was not in a good spot. In fact, I left a little bit early to go to the instructor pilot course. I did not make it to the instructor pilot course. I had some very significant problems. I did not make it. I got into a argument with Francine because I was not in a good spot. And some very overzealous cops decided that I belonged in the clink that night. So off I went to the clink for the night, and First Sergeant Howell was home, and he, along with some other folks, came and got me out of there. And they're like, "You're not going to the instructor pilot course anymore, but you're home, so just obviously you're there." And that was a time in the battalion where we had some very serious leadership challenges. Very serious leadership challenges. And I could sit here all day and badmouth people, and that's just really, it just seems very counterproductive. But I didn't necessarily feel that I was being at all supported. So this happened, and I didn't go, and there was never a time when anyone in Afghanistan in any leadership role emailed me, called me, or anything. It's like, "All right, dude, are you good? What happened? Like, what's going on?" It was just, Matt's in trouble. And these guys got on the internet, they found my mugshot, they freaking made a bunch of ha-has about it at the back in Bagram, from what I'm understanding. That hurt a little bit. It was not funny at all. And they just never bothered to ask about that. So that was kind of how I started that whole cycle, which was not on a good note. But I started talking to some folks, getting myself straightened out. Clearly I needed to.
So, I never even knew about that till now. And I will say this, it's unfortunate that professionals conduct themselves in that manner. That you have somebody that was supposed to be your friend, right? And if they weren't your friend, I don't know the story, whatever the case, but we're supposed to be professionals in the aviation community or in the Army, period. And for you to conduct yourself like that just because you may not like somebody, it's something I wouldn't have tolerated if I was there, because I think I came back in early December. I think I came back same time you did. And I had no knowledge of it. But all that does is show people's level of immaturity, right? Especially when they should be doing the right thing.
Correct. And I probably should have prefaced all this by saying, at the point I was a W3, and I was a leadership challenge, to put it the best. That's still just that squid in me trying to wrap my brain around how the Army works. And I questioned a lot of things. I didn't always do it properly. I made some enemies. I had tons of friends, but I know I had folks that were like, "I don't know about this freaking Matt Cole dude, man. Something ain't right with him," and butted heads with a lot of people, both commissioned, warrants, and enlisted people. And I don't know if that was a contributing factor to the way that whole situation was handled when they were still in Bagram and I was at home, and I kind of, literally got the rug swept out from under me. I don't want to say that this just was an accident that happened, but it happened. Choices were made that night, but I also feel that choices that I made throughout my career that led up to it, reputation, notoriety, maybe that's the best word to use, but I definitely was a leadership challenge. And, as a leader, sometimes you have to do some hard stuff, but also it's like, well, Matt's back there. We'll just worry about that crap later. I don't know in particular what was going on through, and this was not at the company level, mind you. So you can take out of that what you want, So, I don't know what was going through this particular leader's mind at the time about what I had going on. I don't know. But I do know what did not happen. So I can only speak for what happened in my foxhole on that particular day, that particular night. But I do have a feeling, a suspicion, and it's pure speculation on my part. I probably didn't do myself any favors before any of this crap happened. Did you? I'm a little bit of a prickly pear sometimes, bro. So I just wonder if that had something to do with it.
And it probably did. So you get past that situation, you get ready for the 2010 deployment.
Correct.
How does that deployment roll out for you?
So while we were at home, I ended up going to the tactical operations officer course, right?
They're willing to send you to be a TAC ops officer, but not an IP.
So the TAC ops officer course came to Fort Campbell.
Oh, okay.
And this is where stuff got kind of interesting with the leadership. So I started the TAC ops course, and got a call from a particular leader that said, "Hey, Matt, there is a shortfall," meaning an immediate opening at the instructor pilot course at Fort Rucker. And it would be in the best interest of the unit, in this leader's opinion, if you go. And I said, "Well, sir, I've already started this particular course. I am knee deep in Soviet radar theory and all this other wacky stuff that has to go with being a tactical operations officer. I'm a little weak on my emergency procedures and limitations at this point, and it's known very well. The first thing you do when you roll up to Fort Rucker to enter the instructor pilot course is you have to take an emergency procedures and limitations test." And I was not entirely confident that I could just blast in there 3 days or 4 days from the time and ace it. Because if you don't, you're freaking out. And I explained that to this particular individual, and he told me, he said, "Matt, there is a very fine line of being asked to do something for your unit and being told to do something for your unit." And I said, "I understand what you're saying. I will continue along with this tactical operations officer course. Thank you. Goodbye." And that was the end of that conversation. So that kind of further soured my relationship with the leadership at that time. But I felt it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do for me. It was the right thing to do for my family because I was at home, and clearly we were in some dire straits at that particular point in time. And it was the right thing for the warlords too. They did not have one, and I could be that for them, and I could continue to be a warlord and serve in a capacity where there was a vacancy. So what fucking difference does it make? That was my thought process behind it. So anyway, I continue on with the course. 2010, we go to Kandahar, and different. So yeah, well, I've already been up in the eastern sector of the country. Certainly this can't be any different, right? Like, whatever. Always freaking different. So no raids, no assaults. We had a particular detachment within the task force that did those things. And it was purely voluntary. You could go do it if you wanted to, or you didn't have to. And I think if I had been asked, "Hey, we need you here," I would have done it. But after doing so much med chase in Bagram, I was fully committed to that cause. And I'm like, bruh, I'm just going to keep following these med birds around. Just going to keep following them around. This is my home. This is where I want to be. And then, of course, we did some other stuff. You move some people around. You fly some generals around. But I was fully immersed in med chase at that point, and was more than happy to be afforded the opportunity to be given the option to do it as much as I wanted.
How was that 2010 deployment compared to 2008 and your 2004 to 2005 deployment?
So that was the first deployment where we did not come home with everybody that we left with. And, Josh Powell's situation has been covered pretty extensively on previous podcasts, but that was the first time that particular tragedy befell us as a unit, was that. So that was a huge takeaway. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. He's a great friend to so many people. And just a damn joy to be around. He was just such an incredible human being. That was a big takeaway. And then in a not so funny but also funny moment, there's a couple of other things that stick out in my mind. And one in particular involves your friend and mine, Danny Stevenson. He was at the time dating or engaged to a girl named Aubrey Ramos, who is an absolute amazing human being. And so I was out at one fob chasing her around, and she was going to a point of injury call, and she elected to be hoisted into this area. And there was a little bit of shooting going on. And I just remember watching this extraordinary woman ride down this hoist And I was just flying like a bat out of hell around her, just looking at all these palm trees and all these freaking different places of cover and concealment for some kind of bad guys. And I'm like, dude, if I screw this up and something happens to Audrey, Danny is going to wring my neck, man. I just remember thinking that very, very vividly. And so anyway, we got done with the call, and I told Audrey, I was like, hey, man, I was like, first of all, you're a badass. I don't know how much dealings you have with Audrey or not, but she's a very humble human being, very quiet, very reserved. And she's like, yeah, whatever. And I was like, all I kept thinking about is how Danny's going to beat my ass if something happened to you. She got a chuckle out of that. I'll never forget that. That was pretty funny, not funny. And then the second one, and then I'll quit running my mouth about this, was I was out at Fob Wilson doing med chase. And the weather was dog shit. I'm talking like maybe 300, 400 meters visibility. Like we were in a full blown on freaking shamal, right? Sandstorm. And so we're sitting around, and when the weather is super, super bad, they don't necessarily blast 9 lines over the radio. They're like, hey, bro, come in here. We need to talk to you about some stuff. So I roll in there with the pilot in command of the medevac aircraft, who was Jeff Brunemeyer, great dude. And sort of like, hey, here's the situation. There is a very small combat outpost that's probably about 10 clicks out to the west from where you're at. And there's been an explosion out there, and it's like a life, limb, or eyesight deal. Like this guy has facial injuries to his eyes. But we know the weather's dog shit, so we just kind of want to get in here, do a little war gaming, and see if we can figure out what to do. So we both looked at each other, and I was like, it's crap, man. And it was dark. It was like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, well, if we take him back to Kandahar, we're not going to leave Kandahar, obviously. And I was like, honestly, I think it's best to do it single ship. And I was like, and I'll leave the option up to you, clearly, because this is your show. I was like, I would recommend that we take 2 piloting commands and chuck it in there, because he had a good, he had a lot of goggle time, and I had a decent amount of goggle time, and one of the younger platoon leaders was out there as his co-pilot, and nothing against him at all. That particular platoon leader is a great human being, a lot of fun to be around, and just a phenomenal leader as well. And he was like, hey man, I agree with you guys 100%. This is probably the best thing to do in this particular instance. And I'm pretty sure that Raheem was with us as well. I'm pretty sure. So we call back to Kandahar. We talk to the battalion commander, and we kind of tell him what our thought process is on it and our plan. And he's like, okay, just obviously, hey man, be careful. Let's, go ahead and do it, execute. So we start making our way out to this place, and bro, it was like the longest 10 kilometers of my life. And like I said, I'm pretty sure it was Frank. So you got me in one seat, Jeff in the other seat, and Frank's head right in between both of us. And he's staring at that radar altimeter, bro. And he's like, sir, 50, 40, 30, 50, 40, 30. He's like counting down, like, whoop, pulling back up, and just kind of like doing this very slow at sometimes 20 knots. Just literally, I felt like a blind person with a red and white cane sticking it out in front of us, finding this place. We finally find a place, pick the kid up. And the visibility was so bad that one of the dudes that was escorting this injured soldier out to the LZ fell in a bunch of concertina wire that was out there, and he got all tore up. So we're like, you might as well just get in, bro. So yeah, we at worst case scenario, we're like, if we go in invert, we'll just climb to whatever a minimum safe altitude is and shoot an instrument approach back into Kandahar. Didn't have to do it. I felt very comfortable with the area and the terrain. Got him in there, and then obviously we were not going back to Fob Wilson that night, so we went to our rooms in Kandahar. Woke up the next day, and the kid who had suffered this explosion, his Kevlar was left in the aircraft. I'm like, well, we'll get it back to him. Let's take it up to battalion or whatever. And come to find out, the explosion that had taken place This poor kid was burning shit, so it was a very, very austere combat outpost. So they got their little wood outhouse with a sawed-off 55-gallon drum in there with diesel and poo in it. And his buddy thought it would be funny to throw an MRE bomb into the pile of burning shit. So MRE bomb, for those of you who don't know, you take a plastic bottle. There's a heater that heats the food inside the MRE up. If you take that heater element and you put it in a plastic water bottle and you put a little water in there, it's water activated heat. You screw it tight. All you got to do is wait. Boom. So his buddy thought it would be funny to take one of these MRE bombs and throw it in the drum of burning shit, and it exploded, and it threw burning shit in his eyes. And that is why we went on one of the craziest freaking missions I've ever done, is because a couple of Joes are out playing fuck games, dude. I mean, it's so crazy, man. So those are a couple of things that really stick out about that deployment. There was a lot of bad, but there was also a lot of great things. There was, there's some humor involved in a lot of things. You can't do this job if you can't laugh at yourself and other things. You always got to find the lighter things in what's going on in life, or you're just going to be miserable human beings. So, but those are two of my bigger takeaways. And I don't know, I could sit here and rant rave about 2010 a lot, but I had a lot of heartache, a lot of rewarding experiences, and also some very fun and funny times on the deployment.
So you get back from 2010. When did you start thinking about retiring?
When we got on the airplane to leave Kandahar. Actually, it kind of started a little bit before that. So I think Josh died in like September of 2010. And I remember going to his ramp ceremony and just taking it all in. I mean, I think you guys have covered ramp ceremonies on here before, but that's basically when an Air Force plane shows up to whatever base that we're at, and whatever folks have lost their lives, they bring their coffins out, flag draped coffins. All of the fellow soldiers and airmen and Marines and sailors and whatnot that are on the base come out and pay their final respects to this particular people as they begin their journey home. And I remember Josh's, and I just kind of remember taking it all in, looking around at all the people and looking at the caskets and watching them just disappear into the back of this airplane, and thinking to myself, I probably should not come back here again. That's when it kind of started. And so we came home, and I was eligible for retirement in 2012, and basically looking at how the next deployment for the Warlord was going to pan out. It would be very easy for me to retire and not go on that deployment. And so I first tried to put in a couple of applications to fly airplanes for the Army. One was denied by HRC. The other one made it all the way up to one of our leaders' desks, and he said that probably would not be my best interest, that I was better off as a helicopter pilot and I should stick around for the next deployment. And hey, I'll sign this for you, but you would really be doing the unit a disservice if you went fixed wing. And I said, I appreciate your input, but I want to go fly airplanes, or I'm going to just retire. Well, he signed it, and I didn't get picked up. And so that just kind of made it way easier for me to be like, dude, I'm done here. It's not like I have just been sitting around doing nothing for the past 10 years since I've been in the 101st or whatever. Like, I feel like I can retire with a hell of a lot of dignity here, And so I put my stuff in, and I retired at the very beginning of 2012 and just missed the next deployment that they went on. So they left probably about 6 months prior to my retirement, something like that.
So you get out the Army. How is your mental health holding up, and how are you feeling?
It was better. At that particular point in time, I was just very disgruntled. Because the whole fixed wing thing, I just kind of tied into, hey man, you've been living your whole life in the military. Like, hey man, What's the next adventure? What's the next adventure? And I saw that as a great opportunity to go off on another adventure. And it was the first time that I was told no multiple times. And I don't know exactly why it went down the way that it did, but it just wasn't in the cards. So that was kind of a first for me, and I didn't like it. But I also knew, like I told you, I don't need to be going back and flying helicopters in Afghanistan or Iraq anymore. I just don't. There's something inside me that tells me this is not a good idea. So, anyway, so I retired, and I was just mad and about that. But as every door closes, a new one opens. I got a call from a friend of mine that used to be in a sister battalion, and he said, "Hey, dude, are you at all interested in flying civilian medevac helicopters?" And I'm like, "Well, hell yeah." And he's like, "Hey, I want you to give this guy a call." And I called this dude up, and he's like, "I'll give you a job literally right now." And so I was still in the Army at the time. It wasn't really terminal leave. I was on rear detachment, because the battalion had left. Our rear detachment commander was a super cool human being, and she was like, it was me and another W3. And she's like, "Hey, man, just check in with me every once in a while, boys. I trust you. Thanks for your service. Enjoy your retirement. Just check in with me until it's time to go on terminal leave." Yes, ma'am. And if she called us up to do anything, we would help her out in any way that she needed to. But bro, that phone was not ringing a lot, so it was really, really nice. A lot of good family time in there. So anyway, then I call this guy up. I said, "Yeah, I just need to get on terminal and get the job." So I started flying for a civilian medevac company, just north of Fort Campbell. And at the time, my wife joined the Navy in 2012. So my wife joined the Navy the same year I retired, and she got stationed out at Fort Belvoir, of all places, for her first duty station as a Navy nurse. And I'm just like, dang, man, here it is. Still squids having to live in the Army world, man. This is just so crazy. So once she got that job, I did like a transfer within the company out to Baltimore, Maryland, and I flew rotary wing medevac out of Baltimore for about 7 or 8 years. Interesting job. Met a lot of good people. Saw a lot of amazing things happen in the back of those aircraft, and some trauma, but a lot of critical care stuff. Super, super sick people hooked up to all these crazy machines and whatnot, and just watch some, again, amazing people do amazing things in the back of aircraft to save these people's lives. It's just, man, it was great. This was probably 2019 or 2020. My wife finished up her tour. So she did a tour at Fort Belvoir, then she did a tour at Walter Reed, and then she got orders to go to Naples, Italy. And the company that I was working for, they had some international rotary wing jobs, but they were really shriveled up, and I didn't have the seniority to transfer internationally within the company. So I started talking to some of the, mercenary dudes or whatever, right? Just guys over doing rotations in Afghanistan, flying aircraft around. I talked to them, and I just really didn't like what they had to say. But at the time, Megan was pregnant with my first grandbaby, and she was like, "Dude, I don't really think that Grandpa needs to be going back to Afghanistan and flying freaking helicopters around." And I said, "Okay." And that's about also roughly after that happened, I found out about the rotary transition programs that some of the airlines were offering. So I interviewed for one at a regional carrier, got hired, flew for them for 3 years. And then about 2.5 years ago, I got picked up by a major airline, and I've been with them. And here we are now. So it's really full circle to now be, when I was 6 years old, I sat and watched the guy taxiing the airliner by me, and I waved. And now I'm the guy that's doing the waving.
What's the biggest difference between rotary wing and fixed wing?
energy management is completely different. So these jets do not like to descend and decelerate at the same time. The wings are so efficient on a jet that you gotta, we don't have speed brakes on a Black Hawk. Well, we do. It's a collective, but it's just different. The thrust is vectored completely differently. Rates of descents, descent angles, you actually have to figure out. There's computers that do some of this stuff, but you need to kind of understand when's a good time to start a descent. When is a good time to configure the aircraft with flaps to slow down? Also, what can you overspeed on a Black Hawk? The rotor, and it's not by anything that you would do unless you would specifically put the engines in a condition to overspeed the rotor. Yeah, a jet is not like that, dude. If you do some dumb pilot shit, you can overspeed flaps, you can overspeed gear, you can. So those are the biggest differences, and the things that I struggle with the most is managing the energy of a slick wing jet and trying to calculate when was a good time to start the descent in a jet and slow down in a jet. Challenging, but I figured it out. And I honestly wish that I would have done this sooner, because I just think back to that 6-year-old me. This was what you always wanted to do. And brother, you took the most roundabout, crazy ass adventure to get here. But now I'm finally here, and I wouldn't change the way that I got here for the freaking world, brother. I mean, just think about you would have missed out on a lot of heartache. You would have missed out on a lot of stuff that sucked, but the friendships you would have missed out on, all the crazy experiences and all that. So
What advice would you give a young soldier, anyone dealing with mental health?
I don't wait. There's a gazillion different resources out there for a young soldier to get his or her mind back on track. But yeah, do not hesitate. Now we are it's taken a long time, but we're getting into a military where having mental health issues is not a stigma anymore. It is hey man, we're all human beings. We all have our problems. And at the end of the day, I don't give a crap how many Blackhawks you have. I don't give a crap how many guns you have. I don't give a crap how many missiles you have. If you don't have some freaking people to freaking push the buttons and pull the triggers of these particular systems, you don't have anything. A soldier is the most valuable asset in our Army. A sailor is the most valuable asset in the Navy, and so on and so forth. So if you want to be a force multiplier, go out there and take care of yourself first. And that chain of command now is at a place where they will freaking support you unwaveringly to make sure that you're taken care of. And I can cite a gazillion different instances of how that's happened. But again, I would turn that into a 10-hour podcast, and nobody wants to listen for 10 hours, but the help is out there. The stigma is rapidly disappearing. The support is there from all echelons of the chain of command. Utilize it. Just utilize it and don't hesitate.
I'm happy to see that too, man, because our era, I talked about it several other times. We didn't have that at our disposal coming up in our generation. What was the happiest moment in your military career?
Making pilot command as a W1, I think, was probably one of the most happiest. And not because, ooh, hey, look at me. I don't care about that crap. It was a goal. It was the first goal that I set for myself in Army aviation. And it felt really, really good. I was very, very happy. And I'm not going to lie, dude, the slaps on the back from all the boys in the company and oh man, that's awesome. Good job. It just felt really good. I mean, everybody loves being complimented and, feeling, getting that kind of accolades. But it just made me incredibly happy to be, not only to do it, but be surrounded by some people that supported it 100% and were just genuinely happy for me. So professionally, that was my most happy. And then my most happy personally was coming home every time. You can't beat a good frickin' homecoming ceremony, bro. You can't beat that shit. There ain't nothing better than what. And I at first did not particularly care for it. Like, bro, we've been gone for a year. I don't want to form up with all these people. I don't even know half these fools. And then you got form up behind the hangar. They open the hangar. It's a bunch of rah rah sis boom bob. It took me years to figure out that, Jason, that ceremony is not for us. That's not for us. That's for all these people who love you and supported you. That's for them. You know, they need that. That's fair. And so, yeah, you're jet lagged. You're tired of this bull crap, man. But I will never forget every single time I ever came home from a deployment. I will never forget the look on Francine's face. I'll never forget the look on Jackson's face or Megan's face. I remember them very, very vividly. And dude, it don't take much to make a soldier happy. Just let him go the fuck home, bro.
I want to add to that though, real quick, man. It was for us too, because I think we as the global war on terrorism veterans, we at least had something to come home to, right? Them Vietnam guys, they didn't have that shit, man. And
Yeah, it's true, and it's very, very unfortunate.
I only could imagine how these guys felt coming home to an empty airport by themselves, not a cheering squad, not their family there. So the symbolism of it is very important, because when we look back out on it, and I talk about this all the time, I always get emotional about it. We never did anything in the Army alone, ever. From coming home to leaving. So that was very important. What is the biggest regret? What is one of your biggest regrets in life or in the military, if there is any?
My biggest regret in the military is being at times a leadership challenge for people. And I've said multiple times throughout the course of this podcast, is I really wish I would have taken a little bit of a different thought process instead of just reverting back to squid mentality. Dude, you're in the Army. You're in the Army. And things are the way that they are, whether you agree with them or not. Things are the way that they are in the Army, you know. And I could cite a gazillion examples, but I think that given the scope of the audience for this, they all know what I'm talking about. There's just so much dumb shit in the Army that's just ridiculous. And I think if I would have done a little bit better job of embracing, okay, I'm in the Army now. This is where I'm at. And yeah, this is kind of dumb, but it says Army on your shirt, bro. Do it. And don't be giving those people don't be questioning so many things. Don't be such a pain in the ass. I mean, I think there's a time and a place to question, certain things that are going on. But, I really gave some of them poor lieutenants a lot of grief. I gave some company commanders a lot of grief. I gave battalion commanders a lot of grief. And it wasn't because I didn't wake up in the morning and be like, I'm going to tell this guy that he's an idiot or whatever, because it was just very tough. And I wish that I would have left the ears open for a little while longer when some quote unquote dumb Army crap was happening, and waited to open the mouth. That is my biggest regret. And for any poor leader out there that's listening to this, I'm sorry. I'm the way that I am. This is why I apologize to y'all for making your life such hell. That's my biggest regret, professionally. Personally, regret-wise, I mean, I think we all have done things over the course of our lives that we regret. But I think with the situations where you have regret, becomes an incredible opportunity for growth in between your ears and your brain bucket there. And while it's easy to, kind of be regretful and focus on that regret, I think if you look at a situation that you might regret, and maybe reflect more on how you can grow as a human being, potentially from whatever it is that you done screwed up, that's probably going to treat you a heck of a lot better than sitting there and sulking about whatever it is that you did that you have regret over.
What legacy you want to leave behind for your family and your friends?
This is my legacy. These are my grandchildren. That's Lima, and that's Harper. So I know someday old grandpa ain't going to be around. and they don't understand all this nonsense, what grandpa did, but someday they'll be old enough to watch this. And I hope that they understand why grandpa's as crazy as he is and how much he loves them. So that's what I hope to leave behind, is something for these youngsters to watch at some point in time and be like, dang, that's my grandpa.
Me as a grandfather, capturing these moments is very important because unfortunately we live in a world, life is what life is, right? And I never try to be pessimistic, but I try to be realistic as well. And the one thing the Army taught me is that you should always be realistic of people's expectations in the world, right? I know once I leave this earth, there's only going to be a handful of people that really think about me every day. After those people gone, I'm pretty much one generation removed of never being known again. And if we don't capture these moments and share them with the world, they'll be lost forever. And this is why
Yep, I agree 100%.
it's important we do this. What's one thing you would tell your younger self?
Leave the ears open, pause, and keep the mouth closed a little bit and process the information before you open the mouth. Because once the words go out, you can't put them back in.
If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
My 3 words would be stubborn, flawed, and grateful. I've given a ton of instances in this podcast of how stubborn I've been when it comes to things. And because of that stubbornness, I am a flawed person. But I'm grateful for the opportunities that the Navy gave me, the opportunities that the Army gave me, and the opportunity that my family, first and foremost, has given me. Without them, none of this would have been possible. I think those are the 3 words that best describe me.
I want to end on a good note. 2 good notes. First thing, explain to me why you're a Swiftie fan. I mean, I know she's legit, but let me hear this real quick.
We obviously lived just very close to Nashville when we were in the 101st, right? And I got, young kids. So when Taylor Swift was popular, when she was first up and coming and stuff, we had the opportunity to take the kids to see her, when she's 14, 15 years old, playing in these little clubs, playing at the Ryman, stuff like that. And it just kind of stuck with me, not my genre of music, but at the time. But you know what? If your kids like them, and you want to be like that cool parent, right? Like, oh man. So it just was like, if I start listening to this dang music of hers, I can relate to my children. And then I kept listening to it more and more, and I was like, oh my God, I freaking like this shit. I can't believe I like this music. And I just think she is a class act, dude. I think she's a very classy young woman, and the things that she has done are incredible. Girl got a lot of haters, but you know what? So do I. Probably not nearly as many as her, but I just think she's a really classy person. But it all started because of just trying to find some common ground with my children and the music that they listen to, and then being able to afford them the opportunity to go see her live. And those are also memories that we will have for the rest of our lives. Like, hey man, remember that one time we freaking saw Taylor Swift at the Ryman and we were like freaking 3 rows away from her? Yeah, try that now. Boy, you better put out a second mortgage on your house if you want to do that now.
You got that right.
So that's how that happened.
The last thing I want to ask you, how does it feel? First off, the legacy you've created is very impactful, and I'm very proud of you for it. How does it feel that you being a retired CW3, okay, that your wife is in the military and both your children are in the military? How does that make you feel as a father and a husband?
Extremely proud, dude. I got nothing but pride for them cats, man. They're awesome. They're awesome. I'm immensely proud of them, and they've gone on to do some amazing things. My son is a Marine. He's a helicopter crew chief, and he's out teaching people how to work on these helicopters now. He's an instructor.
I remember when Malik and Jackson used to run around in the backyard, bro.
Uh-huh. That was so long ago.
And
That was so
and
long
now we
ago,
got 2
man.
young men that are doing phenomenally in life, man. It is
Yep.
crazy, bruh.
Yep. And time flies when you're having fun,
Yeah,
bro.
so your daughter's a medic. You're she's in the Navy too?
Yeah, she's in the Navy. She's done 3 tours. Her second tour, she was attached to a Marine Corps unit, a lineman. And long story short, she ended up being part of the Kabul evacuation. She was working the Abbey Gate for a long, long period of time, and unfortunately, some friends of hers were on the gate. Very good friends of hers were on the Abbey Gate when it got bombed, and those friends lost their lives. But her resilience throughout the whole ordeal, her tenacity to get her mind straight after losing friends in such a horrific event like that, has been nothing short of phenomenal. I would venture to say that that young woman probably saw more shit in the week and a half to 2 weeks that she was at that Kabul airport than we saw in, however many combat tours we did. I'm incredibly proud of her. She will be leaving the military soon. She's focusing on being a mommy to them 2 little knuckleheads I just had in here, and is getting married to a phenomenal young man. And I couldn't be more proud. And Francine, man, what an incredible story she has of her own. Joining the Navy after I retired, and when I'm in the process of retiring, and she's gone on to do some very, very amazing things in the nursing community in the Navy. She's a peri-operative nurse. Her specialty is working in the operating rooms, and now she's basically running an operating room. Like, my girl's straight up gonna be a O5 pretty soon. I mean, like, she's a big deal, dude. She's a big deal. I'm so proud of her, and all and Megan and Jackson's accomplishments too. Um, I would have never in a million years expected that this is the way things were going to pan out for my wife and my children. Uh, but I could not be more proud of all of them, and they just mean the world to me, man.
With you being a 3-time combat veteran, just make sure you keep an eye on your daughter, man. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
lived it. Just be involved,
Yep.
man, and you're already doing that. You got the shit locked in tight, man. Any final words before I say my final words?
I can't believe it. We're at the end of the line on the Big Santi Express. It's time to pull into the station. It's been a great train ride with you, bro. I think what you're doing for us, for our brothers and our sisters, and for giving other people who have little to no insight into what our world is like, to let them step in and listen to our stories and preserve them for the future, is nothing short of amazing. And I'm very, very proud of you for what you're doing, dude. Very proud. And I thank you for the opportunity to be able to come on here, and what I feel is just shooting the shit with one of my brothers back in the day, except this time I'm not going to dump 20 shots down your neck, seeing if you're worth a damn, because that's what happened the last time we were together, which I kind of apologize for, but kind of don't. But that
Uh,
shit was pretty funny, man.
oh, man.
But no, thank you. Thank you very much, Jason. I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
And, Matt, I wanna let you know, man, it's because of you that I don't drink Jameson anymore, alright? It's funny, Double D, Dave Draper, he gave me a bottle at my retirement party, and it's still sitting on my counter. We're talking over 10 years ago. I won't drink it just because the memories, but I will say this, that's playful. All the memories I do have with you are all great, man. I remember flying with you, the parties, the way you took us in, always being loving and receptive, your family accepting mine. And man, I am honored to have a brother like you, bro. I truly love you, man. And this is why I'm doing this, bro. We don't have a lot of time left on the world, and I'm trying to show the world, all my cool friends and all the cool people in the army, that we may have not have been generals, we may not have been presidents, but the impact we had on our society and for our country does make a significant. It's significant. It's important. And you guys, your stories need to be told. And like I said, I thank you, man, for supporting me. Every time you support me, I thank you very much. I thank you for being, vulnerable and sharing your story with the world. And I agree with you, man. There's some things I would have done different in the army with just being angry all the time, but we're young, man. Our life happens for a reason, right? And
Yes, it does.
when we grow up and become men, we could look back and say, "Hey, maybe I should have done this a little bit different." But hey, we're here. We're where we're at right now. And hell, I think you're an amazing human being, bro. Shit.
Well, thanks. And maybe I will get around to growing up one of these days, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, my brother.
Listen, why grow up, right? Why grow up to
Yeah.
be unhappy? Be happy, be you. That's how I know Matt. That's how I know Matt Cole. You're always happy, always the light in the room, always joyful, and stay that way, all right?
Well, don't worry about that. I will.
I want you to know if you need anything from me, brother, let me know. Let's not make this podcast the last time we talk, which I doubt it'll be because we chop it pretty often. And if you need anything from me, I sincerely mean it. Reach out to me, man. Okay, and I'll do the same for
Likewise,
you.
my dude. Likewise, my dude. I always got your back, brother.
I appreciate you, man. It's another wonderful episode of Heroes Have Wings. Do me a favor, subscribe and like and share. Let's start spreading this message so everybody's stories could get known and we could grow this podcast because it's not about me. It's never been about me. When I did medevac, when I flew GSAP, never about me. It's always about everybody else, and that's how I'm going to continue to live my life. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Matt, thank you. Another episode of Heroes Have Wings. You guys have a great evening. Thank you for tuning in to Heroes Have Wings, where we honor the extraordinary stories of grit, sacrifice, and resilience. Remember, every hero's journey starts with a single step, so take yours today. If you love this episode, like, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep pushing limits, breaking barriers, and living your truth. I'm your host, Jason Santiago, and this is Heroes Have Wings, where legends rise.